Okay, Craig is on, Zachary, if you haven't seen that.
Yeah, no, I see him. He can unmute now if he sees it.
Hi, Craig.
I think he's still muted. Yeah, he's still muted. I think he's probably just doing something.
It's okay. He'll know I said hello.
Sure.
He looks very serious indeed.
Yeah. Let's see.
Well,
Hi, I'm now unmuted and here.
can I just start? There's just
Wait,
nothing.
let me turn my volume on. That would help.
Can I just start with nothing related to congestion pricing, but for all of the people who live in the affected areas, I understand that the Districting Commission approved that Roosevelt Island and the far eastern avenues will remain part of District 5 within the Manhattan City Council District. So that's all.
Wait, sorry, I missed that. My computer was muted. Did you say that it has been that an agreement was reached and the city council districts are now going to remain close to as they are now?
Yes, that's what I understand.
Oh, that is great news. Does it still have to pass the redistricting?
It did pass the redistricting.
Oh, it did. Okay.
Commission, so now it has to pass the city council.
Got it. So
that's my advertisement for the redistricting map. So it looks good that CB5 will include, I mean, that the City Council District 5 will include all of Manhattan, CB6 and CB Community District 6 and Community District 8, the far eastern parts, and Roosevelt Island. So that's all good news. And on to more relevant things. It's 6:31. We have a bunch of people. People will still, I guess, join as they do. If you want to give it one more minute, Zachary, and then do your spiel, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was going to say, why don't we let Zachary, for the last time, give his little speech, because this is sadly Zachary's last meeting as part of Community Board 8. He is going to be moving on in his career, and we wish him the best of luck and thank him for all of his work that he has put into assisting us and all of Community Board 8 during his time on the board.
Yes, that's huge.
Yes,
Good
thank you,
luck.
everyone. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure working with the community board and serving the fantastic community of the Upper East Side and Roosevelt Island. So thank you all very much. And let's start. And good evening, everybody. Welcome if this is your first time joining us. Everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for co-chairs and the presenters. Following the presentation, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon, pressing raise hand, not the wave or thumbs up buttons. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you are on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions for the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you have an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participant section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support.
Thank you. Craig?
All right, I was going to say let's get started. Good evening, everyone. This is the October 6th, 2022 meeting of the Community Board 8 Manhattan Congestion Pricing Task Force. I am Craig Lader, one of the co-chairs, along with Alita Camp, and we thank you for joining us tonight. Before we begin, I just wish to give everyone a heads up as to how we want to try to proceed tonight. So I think we all have seen through various meetings that we have often reverted back to discussions and comments focusing on general support and opposition of congestion pricing. And I think tonight we want to try to take a different tack and try to really focus on a specific topic. And that is, after we provide updates, that is the identification of policy recommendations through the Traffic Mobility Review Board regarding potential congestion pricing impacts on persons with disabilities. So with that, I just want to respectfully ask everyone that if you wish to speak, that you please limit your comments to the item being discussed. And that goes for other agenda items as well. And to please not provide extended comments as to whether you may or support congestion pricing, because we've heard everyone's reasons before. I think everyone is very well aware of why people may support or oppose it. If you do wish to just let people know as you're speaking, if you support or oppose congestion pricing, you may just simply say your name in it, whether you are a supporter or you oppose congestion pricing, but you don't even need to do that. We just ask that you please refrain from any other further comment or expansion of that. And if the chairs feel that you're veering off topic and onto tangents in regards to statements of support or opposition, we reserve the right to mute you and move on to the next speaker. We're really trying to stay focused today and hopefully really get something done to move this discussion forward and to try to generate substantive recommendations on the issues that we're discussing. So with that, I guess we can start with item 1, which is just an update on the Central Business District tolling program since we held our last task force meeting. And I don't know that there are any real substantive updates. The comment period was closed and the comments are now being, I guess, consumed. And my understanding is that it's going to be in a few months where there will be a determination on the federal level. But that's really all that I have. That isn't just political in nature and just everyone trying to position themselves in terms of how this may move forward. But there's nothing official that I've heard of from the MTA. I don't know, Alita, if you have anything that you've heard, but
I haven't heard anything either. I'm sorry, I'm just moving into another room, but I haven't heard any updates or any other information about this, so.
Yeah. Okay, and then, so I guess we can, let me just see here. Michelle, did you have any comments regarding or any news to share regarding congestion pricing? You can unmute Michelle.
No, but yeah, thank you. I don't have any additional news. I do have some comments. The first one being, I appreciate that you do not want to discuss the elephant in the room. And so that's okay. We have no additional news because we have no idea about the specifics as to how they are going to be handled with the entire population, never mind those with disabilities. I have one comment about disabilities that we addressed in our resolution, and that is that there is an effort to have those with disabilities somehow be identified under this program, and therefore by being identified, the program can somehow accommodate them, either by eliminating or reducing tolls when they come into the district. Now, my concern about that is if it's a broad issuance to a person with disabilities, such as a disability placard or one of those handicap signs that you hang on your mirror, and a person broadly qualifies for that and therefore has one of those identifications, that's fine, because that requires you have to submit to the city or state, you have to have medical paperwork, blah, blah, blah. You have to have all that stuff. So that's not so difficult to assign something like that to a person and then base their entry into the zone on whether or not they have something like that.
And we can we'll definitely talk about that as we're moving into that specific agenda item, which we're not ready to do quite yet. So I just
I thought if there were no comments on updates on the tolling district, that you were into agenda item 2.
Well, yes, but we also have one person that we want to recognize if he is on the call beforehand, and I'll let Alita explain, even though I don't see him here. And second, it is just our practice that we would allow the public to speak first. So
Right. So what Craig is alluding to is that the chair of Community Board 11, which is just to our north, it begins at 96th Street where we end and continues north, right next to us, excuse me, wants to join and talk about his own experience or a little bit about a resolution. I think that CB11 just passed, but he's at another event, so we're waiting for him to join. When he joins, we'll just slot him right in. But otherwise, Craig is absolutely right. We usually do start with public comments, although having said that, I don't see any members of the public with their hands raised.
Well, I was going to say, let's just give people, as we move into that next topic. And again, the topic is identification of policy recommendations to the Traffic Mobility Review Board regarding potential congestion pricing impacts on persons with disabilities. I just want to allow the public to have a chance to raise their hands.
I know, Michelle, we see you. We know your hand is raised. No worries. And there are a couple of members of the public who have their hands raised, so we could start with them for now, Craig.
All right.
Andrew Fine had his hand raised, and then we'll go to Evelyn David. So Andrew. Zachary,
hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I'm not going to add anything at all to the debate on whether or not congestion pricing makes sense or not. I mean, we've beaten this horse to death. It's obviously regressive and anti-family, anti-disabled, so on and so forth. So I won't go there. I do want to make a comment, though, that I feel that the community, and as a community member, that we've all been thoroughly disrespected by the community board. We spent 4 hours last month chewing over a resolution, debating a resolution, coming up with a resolution, 4 hours, not one person, several people, many people. Then we went to the full board and we spent another 4 hours. And at the end of the night, the chairman of the board summarily just disrespected, dismissed, and disregarded our comment and our work in 9 seconds flat. Totally shut down and shut out. The problem I have here is that the community board should be about the community, not about being bored and being on the phone or on the Zoom calls for 4 hours a night to get your 2 minutes of commentary if you're in the public. I think the public has to be far more engaged. And I feel that actions like we saw last week in the full board meeting, where after investing like hours upon hours, tens of hours, 20s of hours, almost 100 hours on this topic, to be summarily dismissed in just 9 seconds is just so discouraging. I mean, personally, I really wonder, oh, sorry, that's my cat. I really wonder why I do this. Does it make any sense? Why should I participate? Unfortunately, it seems like nobody is listening. And it seems like a terrible, unfortunate waste of time. It smells a lot to me like all of our efforts on the blood center. We're spinning our wheels. We're talking amongst ourselves. And I feel that the community board's not hearing the community, and the public at large is not hearing the community board. So I wonder if somebody can explain to me why it makes any difference getting on these calls. And, I'm seriously reconsidering whether or not it's worth the time and effort. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say that I see how frustrated you are, and I'm 100%, maybe 130% sure that you're not the only one who feels that way. I understand the frustration. I hope that you do continue to come to these meetings. We do try and listen to the public and incorporate your views in the resolutions that we write, in the comments that we hear, and incorporate in those resolutions, because we are the voice, or at least how I see it is that we are the voice of the community and the liaison between the community and the government decision makers that actually have their way with the rules that affect all of us. Go ahead. Oh, could you just
Okay,
unmute
there we go.
and-
I'm unmuted. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I really feel that the way, just in general, and I'm sorry that this is a broader conversation, but I feel that the way that this community board is operating right now, the full board meeting, for instance, and I know the snow melt is like the perfect example, and everybody says, well, every snow melt system is different. I really do think that the way that things work have to be reformed, because nobody sells a 4-hour movie nowadays, right? And people have a short attention span. I really do think that things like snow melt systems, you just cut the chase, go to the hot button issues that people care about, things that are close. If a snow melt system was approved by committee at 14-1 or 13-2 or 5-0, whatever, I don't think we have to relitigate the entire snow melt system in front of the full board. I just think, and I do think that the board should incorporate more and encourage more public comment. I do think that public comment would be more plentiful if we had a streamlined way to handle this. And again, in terms of and not to be summarily dismissed in 9 seconds after 8 hours of conversation. I just thought that was wrong. We literally had 12 straight people testifying against congestion pricing. It was put on the back burner behind the bike thing, and I understand that. But bottom line is that we all waited for like 3 hours to have a thoughtful discussion, and we were just completely shut down. So very disappointed.
I know that.
And I hope this process can improve.
I
Thank
know
you for
that it's
listening.
really frustrating. How the community board operates is another conversation that we can have, or you can have with anyone at another time, but we'd like to try and keep this focused. Having said that, though, we really do want to incorporate conclusions, points about disability relating to congestion pricing in our resolution, and would like to stay focused on that. The broader issues of either last time's public meeting, the full board meeting, or future meetings is something that should be taken up at another time. But what I'd like to do right now is introduce Xavier Santiago, who's the chair of Community Board 11, to be able to address what his board is doing. So with that, if everyone doesn't mind, that we just go right to Xavier, because he's in the middle of an event. He stepped out to be able to join us. Thank you.
Xavier, if you're here, you can unmute yourself now.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for everyone being here. I'm just at the city council at the moment. We're having, I was invited last minute to the Hispanic Heritage Celebration. They're nearly at the end, so my apologies for being a touch late. So yes, we did take a position with congestion pricing that is a no, and we listed a whole series of reasons why, what our reservations were, what our concerns were. And you can find that on our website, which is cb11m.org, and you can find our Airtable, and you'll see our position there, which is enshrined. But I'm pretty sure if you pull it up, you can see it. Please share it with your board. Our concern, and again, is because where we are in northern Manhattan, we had many reservations because of, disability is a massive one of them, because of the amount of seniors we have in our community. We have one of the higher concentrations of public housing with our NYCHA developments. Many of the residents in there also have mobility issues. And there were a whole host of other concerns that were wrapped into that position. So I think when we look at it holistically, and again, when we're talking about what the MTA was doing with this particular plan and saying like, yes, we're going to divert those monies to disadvantaged communities, I just can call out, and many of us did, Second Avenue subway. Just point to fact, that started when my dad was growing up in the South Bronx in the 1950s. So a lot of people have a complete reservation when it comes to how congestion pricing plays a part, but particularly our elderly and those that have mobility issues. And with that MTA announcing bus cuts or less stops, it's already going to make it a very difficult situation. And the other aspect too that we played in part is that many of the people who receive medical services, they don't necessarily receive them in the community they live in. And that is a challenge. I know many neighbors within, and I live on 102nd, within about 2-3 blocks, who go and receive services down into Lansing Street, because that's where Mount Sinai has one of their setups. That being said, the other part I wanted to share with you is that the other aspect we discussed was, because I lived in London during congestion pricing's implementation, and there are a lot of challenges that we are facing here that is completely different to what London experienced in that aspect. And I think it's very important to realize that our unique setting is that we're an island. London had urban sprawl. All they have is a major body of water is the Thames. And they are also not facing being bridged right next to another country, or which would be the equivalent to us being bridged next to another state, right? So that was another component I think that when people have referenced, it doesn't really connect as much. But again, our larger concern was that we know the difficulties facing our community members, many of them beyond just the mobility, the seniors, they have technology issues. So being able to have those carve outs would be very difficult for them to access. And then the final bit was the health benefits, right? We have one of the higher cases of asthma. What we have noticed is that during the pandemic, more cars have been parking in our neighborhood and still continue to park in our neighborhood and then take the subways to express stops down, because then they don't sit on the FDR. With the congestion pricing model, there is a high concern that will then push that vehicular traffic further into our community. And case in point, we had made the discovery during the pandemic that many people were using WhatsApp to do vehicle exchanges because alternate side was only in effect twice a week. So these are all kind of coalescing together as a concern. Again, we look forward to, in any way we could collaborate. I'm always here as a resource. Alita can tell you, Russell and I have spoken fairly extensively. But I'm just here to be a resource and share my experience having lived abroad, and also too, as we advocate for creating health equity, how do we do that without reinforcing the tale of two cities, which is what a large concern is in our community. So thank you. I hope that was the best elevator pitch going down I could give you right now.
Can I actually ask a question, please? So you explained your community board's reasoning for opposing it, but did you offer any recommendations as to how to mitigate it, and any policies, since we're talking about people with disabilities and what their and potential impacts, what policies you'd recommend to potentially mitigate those impacts?
So
assuming
what
that congestion pricing is moving forward, which I think should be the modus operandi at this point.
Yeah, so I think part of that, what we have been discussing, and they're starting their discussions on staking out a position, and keep in mind, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
It's Craig Later, I'm the co-chair.
Oh, Craig. Oh, Craig. Okay, it wasn't popping up. I'm on an iPhone, so
no worries.
Thanks for the patience. I think there was a great deal of frustration that this was announced and dropped in August when a lot of people are away, and I know they extended the period for comments, but there wasn't ample runway for us to actually say, okay, let's do X, Y, and Z. What I can tell you is that when I first came back from London, I had extensive conversations with Gail Brewer and Mark Levine, because they were curious about neighborhood parking permits, borough parking permits, et cetera, and so on. What they do in London, and having lived in the equivalent to Manhattan, is the borough of Kensington and Chelsea. You have parking, like borough-wide parking, right? You can traverse. Then you have neighborhood parking for your overnight. Anytime you exit out of that, you would go, say you went to another borough, you typically have to find a metered parking. In this particular instance, the majority of vehicular traffic that is we're going to be penalizing, right? Many people who do have cars, and I'm going to explain further. During my research, State Farm is the largest insurance provider for the state of New York. They actually charge 96th Street and up, and 100 on the east side, 106th Street and up on the west side, a higher premium, because there's a higher concentration of cars and a higher degree of accidents. So that is part of their algorithm. Many of our people in this community use those cars. They have family members in Queens, et cetera, and so on. So again, a recommendation that was given, sorry, everyone's coming out, I think they've concluded, was that why don't we explore the possibility of having a borough-wide parking permit, so it doesn't penalize our elderly, those that have disabilities or need to use services or get around town to just exist. So that way they use our free bridges. But at night, you go back home to your community district. That was some of the initial discussions early on. Right now, it's as you kind of alluded, the horse is out of the barn, and we're really trying to catch up at this point in time. So I think it's more about how do we approach and should we penalize Manhattanites, right, versus the people who are really bringing the traffic in. And case in point, as I'm sure you've done your research, Craig, I haven't seen you in years actually, but it's all been virtual. Over 100,000 cars are Uber and Lyft that come into the borough every single day. When we moved back from London in 2015, I gobsmacked at the mere fact that so many black cars were in the streets, clogging the streets, driving erratically. And I think that's something that definitely should be in the discussion, because that causes a lot of congestion, right? The other part that we have discussed and how do we get our deliveries in? So if you look at the deliveries, go to 125th and Lexington. At any particular time, point of the day, you will find it clogged and bottlenecked, right down to 110th, 112th, right in that area. I've seen that walking all the way down into Midtown, into the 40s and 30s at given times of the day. So I think the question that we had is how do we get our main delivery hubs for groceries, for CVS, right, all the major providers to get the deliveries in the middle of the night, right? The hours of 12 to 5, for example. These are questions, but again, you'd have to convince other entities to participate in a model like that.
Well, you know what? I hope that if we do come to consensus and are able to pass a resolution relating to the disability issues we wanted to discuss this evening, that we will get support or approval from something similar from CB11. I think there's strength in numbers. So we'll be sending you our resolutions as well. I know that you've taken it up with energy. So I think that that's really good, and very much appreciate your coming and sharing your thoughts. We're aware and cognizant of a lot of different issues that not just the yes or no, but just all the implementation details and points of impact on not just Upper East Siders or Upper Manhattanites or Manhattanites, but citywide and locale-wide. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and just in kind of conclusion, I think one of the comments shared by the board members were, they said our abuelitas should be able to afford the same luxury to go get services in Midtown and beyond just to get an appointment versus those who may not have those, who do have that disposable income. And I think the case in point is that if you look at our subways on the 6th line, we have, and again, back with disabilities and mobility issues, we don't have elevators at 96, 103rd, 110th, 116th. So again, that'll come in when they eventually do 2nd Avenue subway, which may be another 5 to 10 years, who knows? So again, I appreciate that. We always try to work collaboratively with all of our sister boards. So thank you for having me in the space.
We're glad that you were able to come. I hope you enjoyed the event. Thank you so much. Craig, are we ready to go back to the public? Do you have any other questions for Xavier?
No, I want to let him go, and I thank him for coming in and providing an update as to what our neighbors are doing. So I think we can move on with the public, and I also just respectfully ask that I understand there probably are other people who want to comment about what happened at the full board meeting. I would ask that if anyone feels like they need to voice those concerns, simply say you agree with what Andrew said, and any other comments, please hold off. And if we need to come back to it at the tail end of the meeting during next steps, we can do that. But otherwise, let's try to tackle the issue that we're trying to face now regarding people with disabilities and how they may be impacted.
Yeah, I completely concur. So having said that, having heard that, let's go to Evelyn David, then Leah Hanlon, and then Erica Burson. Evelyn?
Oh, good evening, everybody. That was amazing. Okay, I want to thank Zach. He is amazing. I am so sorry that he's leaving. He's been so helpful. He's right on everything. And thank you very much, Zach. And I'll call you tomorrow if you're still there to thank you personally. You know, I'm the no taxation without representation person, and I stick with that. So whatever we come up with, the board or suggestions that we make for people with disabilities, and I'm really going to stick to this tonight, how's the MTA going to get the message? Okay, there's nobody representing Manhattan on the board. Having said that, I was thinking about this because I'm sort of, it takes a little while to ingest. So first of all, we were talking about this at work with ambulances and rideshare vehicles. Are they, I have a question, going to be taxed a fare going into the zone? That is one question I have. That was not clear from before. I don't know the answer to that. I remember there was some discussion. Somebody said, no, ambulances are going to get, thwacked. I'm like, no, that's impossible. But you never know. And that, of course, would add to the price of the people paying for the ambulance if they don't have insurance, etc. Okay, so all of this. So I started thinking, seriously, people with disabilities are going to have to register with the MTA board, or the MTA board has to set up a committee or some system with people with disabilities will have to register, okay? And every time that they go into the zone, whether they are driving their car with their license plate or they're being taken with a taxi or an Uber, right? That vehicle cannot get charged. Now, it's not that complicated a system to set up, I'm sure, there is a way to do this. So, I mean, that's just one suggestion I have. Okay. They have to set up a system so people can register every time they go into the zone. The other thing is, if you have a doctor's appointment, so people with disabilities, they won't get charged, right? This is a way for them not to get charged. If they're in Uber or whatever they're in, they'll have to put the license plate. They're going to have to say how they're getting there, and that person, they don't get charged. So how do people register for this? Well, you have to set up a system. You need an algorithm. Is that what you need? I don't know. I don't know how they're going to set it up. It might not be as complicated as we think. People just going to the hospital just on hospital visits, why would they be getting charged? Now, there's got to be a way that those people wouldn't get charged either. Except, I mean, maybe that's not possible. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But people with disabilities, if they have placards for their cars, that whole system you could incorporate them registering through that whole system in a separate way. Now, it would have to be through technology, obviously. So I don't know. This presents a huge problem. And MTA is not thinking about anybody except for money. And I hate to tell you, but they're not going to hit their targets. But anyway, that's another story. Okay, so what else did I want to say? Okay, that's about it. I'm listening very carefully to everything and taking notes. I hope that, that the governor of New Jersey has some input into this. I know he's worried about all kinds of other things. Community Board 11, Xavier was wonderful speaking. And this board comes up with some real down-to-earth, good suggestions. So thank you very much for letting me speak, and we'll see what happens. But they need to set up a system where you can register every single time you have to go to the doctor. Okay, thank you. And link it to the placard system. That would be a way to do it. That's my idea off the top of my head. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Evelyn. And before we move on, Alita, I actually meant to do this before, but I actually just went through the environmental assessment and picked out some key excerpts that deal with the topic. So let me, if you don't mind, just read a few things that were stated in there. Again, some of them are findings and some of them just provide some context. So, as currently designed, qualifying vehicles transporting persons with disabilities include vehicles with government-issued disability license plates and fleet vehicles owned or operated by organizations used exclusively to provide transportation to people with disabilities. Therefore, disabled people traveling by a qualifying vehicle to or within the Manhattan Central Business District would not be charged a toll. Accessified paratransit service, which provides public transportation for customers with disabilities or certain qualifying health conditions, would also be exempt from the toll. Some disabled people may rely on travel by non-qualifying vehicles to or within the Manhattan Central Business District. In that case, the Central Business District tolling alternative would increase the cost for disabled people using non-qualifying vehicles to travel to the Manhattan Central Business District, end quote. A few other lines here of notes. According to the EA, the Central Business District tolling alternative would provide benefits to improve paratransit services, such as reduced roadway congestion and travel time improvements, which would benefit people with these persons with disabilities. And I talked about the additional cost. The cost incurred by people driving to access medical or healthcare facilities would vary depending on individual circumstances. The greatest cost would be incurred by those who have frequent, regular medical appointments that they drive to, and for whom transit is not an acceptable alternative, and who are not eligible for paratransit or non-emergency medical transportation under Medicaid or other insurance coverage. Driving to and from the Central Business District is already expensive given the very limited ability of free or low-cost parking and the cost of parking or taxiing for hire vehicles. And it is likely that people who drive regularly to medical appointments will have higher incomes. Individuals who drive infrequently to medical appointments would incur lower costs because of the toll. The increased cost would be partially offset by the travel time savings provided by a potentially less congested roadway network. TBTA, Triborough Bridge and Transit Authority, or Bridge and Tunnel Authority, excuse me, will coordinate with MTA to provide outreach and education on eligibility for existing discounted transit fare products and programs, including those for individuals 65 years of age and older, those with disabilities, and those with low incomes, about which many may not be aware. And then just for a little statistical context, there are approximately 55,780 persons with disabilities in the Manhattan Central Business District, including 32,280 individuals who have ambulatory difficulty. Thus, 9% of the total population of the Central Business District are persons with disabilities, with 5% of the total population of the Manhattan Central Business District having ambulatory difficulty. I couldn't find any statistics outside of the Central Business District, but that is just a context for that piece of it. And then it also just says, and I'm almost done, the EA says that the project would, according to them, benefit certain vulnerable social groups, including elderly populations, persons with disabilities, transit-dependent populations, and non-driver populations by creating a funding source for the MTA 2020 to 2024 capital program and subsequent capital programs, and by reducing congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District. And elderly individuals would benefit from the travel time and reliability improvements to bus service with the tolling alternative, as bus passengers tend to be older than riders on other forms of transit, such as the subway, and and bus passengers in the Central Business District would benefit from travel time savings due to decreases in congestion. And overall, the EA's finding was that there's no mitigation needed on these issues because there are no adverse impacts. That's just what I'm just reporting the news there. So that's just the context, and maybe some of that hopefully just sparks some ideas in the minds of attendees that could hopefully help facilitate the discussion. So with that, who's next?
One second before we go to Leah. I just want to mention that I see that there are two different kinds or groups of disabilities, temporary and permanent. And permanent may have those government issued license plates or placards, and people who are temporarily disabled, whether it's for medical treatment or a broken leg, for instance, may not have access to that or quick enough to be able to get them where they're going. So maybe they need different kinds, if not overlapping types of response with respect to congestion pricing. So I'm throwing that out there for creative.
That's a very, very good point. I think we can definitely expand on that.
I think it came from another meeting, so I won't take credit, but okay, so let's go to Leah, Erica, but these things are important too, because they paint with a broad brush, but yet they have gaps in the area that they're covering, and it's important to recognize those. If not, because they're willing to accept our resolution if we have one, but also to point out where they're failing, where they are providing a gap. So at least it brings it, hopefully, to their attention. So there are different reasons for this. Anyway, and if you have, in lieu or in addition to any proposed solutions or issues that you raise, if you have other potential gaps, please bring them up. So maybe as a group, we could come up with a recommendation, or even again, so that gaps could be pointed out in the resolution if appropriate. So having said all of that, let's go to Leah, Erica, and then Michael Murray. Leah?
Hi. That was a great lead in to what I was going to say. And with regard to what Craig just read, wow, my ears glazed over. That was quite a mouthful. And I don't really know how to make this work in a way that is not even more complicated than what Craig just read. But let me just point out several circumstances here. My late ex worked at a law firm in Midtown, and he was bona fide mobility disabled, and he took a black car to work every day. He would, I presume, qualify as disabled. I, on the other hand, over the last several years, have spent a couple, 3 months a year on crutches for due to medical problem and recovering from surgery for said medical problem. I don't qualify as disabled, but I frequently have to go all the way downtown to doctor's appointments because when you're on the lower tiers of Obamacare, you have to do that. And there are times when I can't go to the subway, and there are times when it's just too hard to get there by bus, and I have to spring for the taxi. On the other hand, I have a good friend who has been qualifying for Access-a-Ride and is disabled for many years. And her hobby is competitive speed walking. She qualifies as disabled because she had an accident like 25 years ago, and she's never been removed from the list. And yet she's very mobile. So I don't really know how you can accommodate all those different situations and make it fair for some struggling, unemployed, sick person whose Obamacare makes them go all the way to that hospital down on Gold Street or something. It's just, I don't see how to do it without making it crazy like what Craig just read.
Well, it sounds from what Craig read, and Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, that your late ex, and my condolences, Leah, would be charged for taking that black car every day because he wouldn't qualify for the kind of disability without either the placards or taking an Access-a-Ride, for instance.
He could get a placard. He could absolutely have gotten a placard.
But he's taking taxi and limousine cars as opposed to his own car. So his own placard in a car wouldn't apply because he's taking regular.
No, actually, as I read it, as currently designed, qualifying vehicles transporting persons with disabilities include vehicles with government-issued disability license plates. So maybe not a placard, but a license plate.
But it's a disability license plate. It's not the license plate on a TLC vehicle, which would not be disability. We've seen, I mean, I don't know if New York State, but they with the wheelchair on the license plate.
Well, you know, I really don't know how you make it work. I'm not saying it's impossible to make it work. I'm just mystified. Should my ex have, who was bona fide disabled, not gotten the benefit because he had money? Should some abuelita who doesn't have a car and has to take a taxi, should they not get it because they don't own a car and therefore don't have a placard? Should people who somehow have this benefit but are not disabled get it? Should people who are disabled 3 months of the year for health problems and surgery not get it? I don't know how you make that all work in a fair way.
That's why we're having this meeting, to see if we could propose solutions or make recommendations, because it is complicated and there are all kinds of categories. I mean, we've just raised two right now: people with cars with disability plates or placards, people who take TLC vehicles for hire vehicles to their appointments, people who have temporary disabilities. So it is all rather complicated, but thank you very much. If we could unmute Erica and then Michael.
Thank you. So none of the, and I mean, thank you for reading that, Craig, but everybody could have actually read it on their own to save time, which is what we've discussed. So yes, I agree with Andrew in theory mostly, because I actually thought this was settled last month and that the resolution had been written last month. to his point, what ends up making those calls 4 hours long is that there are people on this call that will say, I'm not going to say more about it, but, and then they ramble on for 45 minutes and nobody cuts them off, which isn't fair either to the people that are waiting for things like resolutions or to provide input. I've had multiple sclerosis for 14 years. I'm 53 years old, and by the ADA's definition, I have a disability. But if you look at me, I don't have one, and I don't qualify for a placard, and I don't have a car. So I know I'm going to get hit by this because I get around the city with taxis and Ubers, because there are times when it's 100 degrees outside, or I might wake up on a day where I don't feel well and still have to go about my normal business, where I need that door-to-door service. And I also don't qualify and would never take, after what my grandmother dealt with, things like accessoride. That's one. So I know I'm going to take a hit because I fall into that middle category of people like my parents who have discounted everything, even though they don't need it. And they also have cars. I'm confused by why I would be penalized for not having a car. That's not a question. That's a statement. Second of all, I lived in Europe, like Xavier, I lived in Europe and Switzerland when the congestion pricing happened in London. They actually did a really good job of it. I spent a lot of time in London before it happened and after it happened, and they were successful at it. While New York City is, of course, different than it, I am appalled that they're going to make us pay tolls within Manhattan in our own. I live on 71st Street, so it means I'm 11 blocks south of where this would go into effect based on where I saw the images that are going to be set up. The other thing I would say is this is 100% a done deal. I know close family friends who are in the know about this stuff here in the city. And I think it's important for community boards to write these resolutions, but they're moving forward with it. The biggest concern I have at this point, beyond who can benefit, who gets a discount, who does this, we know that the MTA is not going to have a lockbox. They never do. They have been misappropriating money since the dawn of time. This is not going to go to helping make buses more frequent, make things more accessible, $6 billion to put in new elevators. I mean, we here do not have the ability to stop this. Who does? We represent people from our community districts that support us. Then they go and vote for garbage budgets that take billions out of education. Like, where does this end for us? Because congestion pricing is moving forward.
Well, you know what? The Highway Administration is still looking at it in terms of issuing either their approval or a request for a more detailed environmental assessment.
And it's not about the environment. We know it's not about the environment.
But they're in charge. No, but they're in charge of the highways. And if there's not an accurate or detailed enough indication of the impact on, let's say, people with disabilities, maybe that would be included in their assessment of it because it's part of a highway thing. I don't know really how they function. It's just a suggestion if that's
I mentioned that there's 55,000 people who have self-identified with disabilities. There are tens of thousands of more in Manhattan, I can guarantee you, that are like me, who don't identify that way, who don't qualify for those types of things, who don't own a car and have to rely on car hire services, not only because of how bad the MTA is, but because we need door-to-door service. I don't need a car. I don't get in a car every single day, but I do need to be able to call that Uber when I need to get somewhere that's outside of my local neighborhood. And to get penalized for, I mean, we're already penalized. We already pay the taxi, the thing that's supposed to have all these years been going to the MTA, but we have no accountability for where that money goes. I mean, so it's either the board writes the resolution. I mean, how many more meetings has to happen as a result?
Because the resolution last time was in opposition to congestion pricing. So let's get something out there now that actually has proposed resolutions or suggestions or demands for how, for today, the congestion pricing will deal with people with disabilities and make it fair and not put an increased burden on people.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And
Erica.
do you have any suggestions to that effect, since I'm sure you've thought about it? Do you have any, or?
I mean, it's no more than anybody else has provided at this point. It's just a matter of get the bullets down on paper and get it out. I mean, sometimes you can't, you have to go with, oftentimes we all know you have to make the D with maybe only 40% of the information you have. You can't, there's never going to be 100% consensus or 100% agreement on things. You just got to get the bullets on paper and get it out. And partner with CB11.
Well, I think partnership with other boards is a good thing, but let me ask you something. As someone who has a disability, someone who needs transportation when you need it, how would you feel about having to, I don't know, register or provide information about the reason that you're using the vehicle?
I don't think I think that is patently wrong. And to Craig's point, Ubers aren't considered government cars. So unless I could hang out the window with a barcode sticker going under the thing at 60th Street, there's no way that that's going to mesh. There's so many systems that would have to talk to each other for that.
Well, then how do you suggest, or how does anybody at this meeting suggest providing the information to the congestion pricing economic powers?
I think it's a matter of saying you are going to damage this group of people's quality of life. There's no perfect solution to this.
But if they don't, if they're not going to consider that, if they're going with the way that they've embodied it in their assessment, how would you, to make it fair for people, whatever kind of disability they have or whatever category they fall into in terms of use of cars or vehicles, how can it be structured so that it's not unfair to people, assuming for a second that if this goes forward, it goes forward the way Craig read it? What can we do about it? What kinds of concrete proposals can we make that hopefully we can bang them over the head with so they pay attention?
The thing is, Alita, having lived with this for 14 years, I'm under no illusion that they're even considering people like us.
But we can't take that. We don't want, or I don't want to take that position that they haven't considered you or people like you in the past, so they're not going to now. I'd like to be on record saying this is what we recommend and this is what's fair. So that's why Craig asked for solutions.
My only solution is that they don't do this because it's going to impact all of these populations, period. That's it. It's 2 bullets on a resolution. There's no other solutions beyond that. That's it. They don't do it because it's going to impact these 10 populations or whatever the number is.
I think that's not really going to.
Yeah, but you're trying to sacrifice good for perfect. But
what is and then I think we need to move on. But again, what is the purpose of just stating opposition?
Because sometimes things are just, you oppose it because it's the right thing to do.
But we can't do that now because the resolution has been tabled. So we have to work with what we have, which is, I know people are frustrated and I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but this is kind of where we are. So it might not be more productive. It might be parallelly productive to come up with, I know that's not a word.
I like that word.
Thank you. With proposals for how to make it fair and how to treat people in a way that it's not discriminatory, it's not burdensome, other than than just saying no. I agree that it will have an unfortunate impact on a lot of different groups of people. But for today, let's see if we could work on the disability point of view.
That is my point of view.
I know, and I
have to
understand.
say.
And I understand, but I guess what we'd like to do is come up with some kind of concrete something. And if all it is.
I mean, can't Zachary just start a Word document now, or pull up the Word document and we open up the floor like they did with the Queen's meeting, and we brainstorm?
I think we need to just remain more focused, or else we're going to be here all
But
night.
I think it would be good to brainstorm.
But that's what we're trying to do. I think we should let others speak now and see if maybe they have more concrete ideas. I think you've raised some valid points in your experience. I think may resonate and provide some people with some fodder for potential ideas. And you've identified some issues that I think we should certainly be thinking about. And I think that's helpful in the context, but I think we need to see if maybe someone has some thoughts as to what we could recommend to try to address those issues. We may not be able to come up with perfect solutions, but we may be able to come up with something.
Right. So with that, then let's go to Michael Murray, and then Elaine Walsh. And then I know Andrew and Evelyn, you've already spoken. So let's go after that to Dylan and then come back to you guys. So so Michael, if you could unmute him, Zachary, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my first point is that this doesn't need to be complicated at all. I have severe emphysema and COPD, and I take issues of mobility and being disabled very seriously. And I can't use a lot of public transportation because, as somebody noted, there's a distinct lack of elevators in most of our subway system. When I needed to get out of jury duty because of my chronic lung disease, all I had to do was submit a doctor's letter. And it should be easy enough to require people to submit a doctor's letter and some level of appropriate medical documentation to just get an exemption for whatever license plate they specify, whether it has a disability wheelchair on it or not. My second point is that for the sake of the politics of the circumstance, we should be thinking not just of the people who have to travel into the zone to get medical care, but people who have to leave the zone to get to places like Mount Sinai Hospital up on 103rd Park or 5th, or up to New York Presbyterian. And CB8 could be working not just with CB11, but CB6. The people who live in the zone have every bit as much at stake as the people who live outside the zone. My third point, and this goes back to Erica, is that the taxi drivers and Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and the corporations behind them are lobbying hard for exemptions for the people in those industries. And it's much more likely that those organized corporate efforts will prevail than anybody who's trying to represent the disabled. So Erica probably has a lot less to worry about than a lot of the people who rely on their own cars to get to needed medical treatment. My fourth point is that I would absolutely endorse everything that Andrew Fine said about the use of time at these meetings. And I would point out how, while the people running this meeting have said people need to focus on the topic of useful suggestions that can be put on paper to help people with disabled in this context, they've spent an awful lot of time talking about other things and let other members of the public talking about everything but specific suggestions to just run off at the mouth. And with that, I'm done.
Well, I don't really think of it as I'm sorry, for some reason, there's an enormous amount of sirens this evening. I don't really think of it as running off of the mouth. I think that the gaps, the issues that people raise with areas that need improvement in the MTA or New York State plan is valuable. But point taken about time. And I for one, don't like to be rude to anybody, but we are trying to keep it focused on disability. So again, if we could limit it to that for the sake of everyone's patience and also for trying to be productive. Having said all of that, let's go to Dylan. Oh, are you next, Dylan? Did I say that? Yes, I think so. Oh, Elaine, I'm sorry, Elaine. Elaine was next. Dylan, do you mind waiting because Elaine was ahead of you? I just didn't see her for a second. Elaine? If you could unmute her, Zachary. Thank you.
Make a couple of points and then a suggestion. One, there's a big difference, and the city looks at it differently, between a New York City disability placard and a New York State disability placard. They're totally different, and New York City does not recognize the New York State. So I don't know what you do there, but that's an issue. Also, not everybody has a disability license plate. I do not. My partner has the placard. We did not choose to go for the plate. So that has to be incorporated and I think what Craig read very quickly, I have real problems with the MTA has a responsibility to come up with the plan and ideas. It is not the community, because the community will not be listened to. The other issue I have on the whole issue of disability is the violation of HIPAA. Any type of filing of papers to say that you're disabled or have a medical compromise is a HIPAA violation because it's not private. So transit needs to deal with that, not us. It's not our responsibility to clean up what is the mess here. As far as cabs and Uber, we use a special disability cab. Other people can use it also, but you call and get an appointment. That cab does not have a disability license plate. It has on the side a little logo, but there's no way they have a placard. So do we bring our placard and put it in the window of the cab? MTA has to come up with these ideas and answers, not the community. I'm sorry. And I know you got shut down by Russell and tabling something which was inappropriate and off the wall. Our job is to identify the issues. We cannot make suggestions or recommendations because we don't know what the MTA is thinking. My mind, you want a suggestion? Eliminate what they're doing. We're already gone to 2024, by the way, because of the inability of the MTA to get their act together. Okay? So I think my recommendation is you ask the MTA, here are our questions. You come and tell us how you're going to resolve it. I can tell you that the amount of disabled people and elderly who are becoming more and more challenged physically will overwhelm the system. And to me, what is going to happen is you're going to have two cities, north of 60th and south. And people will begin to try to find, if they can, medical services north of the zone, because it is impossible to deal with it. I had already figured out how to deal with a doctor on 60th Street, but now he's gone to 53rd Street. There's no way I can figure out that problem. It is up to the MTA to come up with recommendations. We are one of how many community boards? Thank you, but you have not dealt with the disability issue on the placards and how do we deal with handicapped people,
Well,
other
then
than ignore them.
then let's raise the questions that the MTA can answer by coming up with solutions. Let's raise as many questions as we possibly can,
Okay.
and put that before them. Make the gaps known, make their insufficiencies or inadequacies known, and deal with it that way if possible. And I guess we'll see if we could get some kind of resolution today.
And,
I
was just going to add, at the end of,
already
I was just going to add, at the end of the day, maybe we don't have solutions for everything, and we say we request that the MTA respond to these issues that we don't have solutions for, and to propose approaches to dealing with them, and in dealing with those inequities that impact specifically the disability community.
Sounds good to me.
Also, but on the other hand, if we came up with a really fantastic solution, why would we want to withhold it from the MTA if that
Yeah.
makes sense? Because once they implement something, it's very hard to change.
Oh,
But-
absolutely.
But having said that, let's come up with the questions. I also just want to note that when London implemented this, and it's advice, I don't know if I've said this before, it's advice to other cities considering it, is to get almost unanimous buy-in and support from the public, which no matter how you feel about it, the MTA in New York State have not done, as gathered by all of this. And I have spoken to, not CB6, but I was talking to someone from CB5 who has also recently taken up the topic of congestion pricing. But let's move on to Dylan. And thank you for waiting, Dylan.
Of course. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I want to start this off by thanking Craig for reading out the list of circumstances. I found that very informative, though detailed. And I think it was already mentioned, things like placards, accessoride, and based on license plates. And it sounded like the main concern we were talking about is people using rideshare apps where that wouldn't be covered. And I want to preface this suggestion by saying I'm able-bodied. I do not have to deal with any of these, but a possible suggestion is that we already heard that these ride-sharing apps are in their own committed effort to try and get out of paying these things. If they're unsuccessful, as I think they might potentially be, they at least have demonstrated an incentive to try and want to put effort to get out of these. And so maybe there would be a system where you register with the city for a disability, either something that you have to do new or something where you're already in the system. They give you a special code, you enter that in to Lyft, Uber, like Co-op, Arrow, whatever the other ride shares are. And while the driver wouldn't be able to see it if you don't want that, it would register as this is for this ride, something where you don't have to pay the toll. And the way I imagine that would effectively work out is that, if it passes under the toll, it would get charged, but the city would know, okay, for this ride, we are going to compensate Uber or Lyft or whatever for that fee. And then Uber can automatically just splash that off of the fee for the person riding it. I imagine that this still isn't a perfect solution, but I think this could possibly plug one of the gaps that people have identified that aren't plugged by accessoride, license plates, and placards. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think there's some possible extension of that could become part of a resolution. I know we have a few more speakers, and I was just going to say, once everyone has spoken once from the public, I would suggest that we allow board members a chance to speak before we go back to the public again, possibly.
Agreed. So with that, let's go to Boaz.
Really quick. First of all, if we are trying to fix the congestion issues that we have in the street, I would suggest adding in the resolution, exploring technology solutions, reaching out to the technology company like Uber, like Via. We used to have a great service in New York City from an Israeli company called Via, ride sharing, carpooling. Explore that option.
Yeah, they unfortunately changed their business model and went out of that.
But that's what I'm saying. They need to partner up. They need to partner up. Tell them, listen, Uber, you want to be in the New York City? Provide a pooling service in New York City, because they already have the code. They already have all the in the backend. They already have all the technology. They just need to enable it. That's what I'm trying to say. Try to partner up with Uber, with Lyft, with the company that are already working in the city, and push them to use the shuttles that Via offered and Uber offered in the past, and during the COVID, they just disappeared. It was very, very great service for people like me, family, people. I have a newborn, I don't have a car, and I really use those solutions. That's one. The second thing, autonomous cars. Let's reach out, I don't know, let's ask the mayor to reach out to Elon Musk. Let's see if we can bring some kind of autonomous cars for the main avenues, Second Avenue, stopping in certain corners. I think that will help a lot. And the third thing, I think that we really need to, if they are basically pushing people to use the public transportation, we say, okay, no problem, but let's add elevators. Elevators, we need elevators not only for people with accessible issues, but my parents are visiting me from Israel. They are old. They just can't go so many steps. They need an elevator. So, I mean, if you have kids, small kids, we need elevators in all the main subway. Thank you very much. Just thinking out of the box. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think elevators are definitely going to be a central discussion point. I think we'll probably be touching on that more as this meeting goes on.
And then Gail Benjamin, and then we'll go to the board right now, the way it looks. Gail?
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I missed the last congestion meeting, but I was out of the country. Otherwise, I would have opposed my objection to congestion pricing overall. That said, I think any kind of proposal that involves, on quote, an honor system is a losing cause. Asking people to submit doctor letters. How many scammers are there in the city? How many fare beaters do we have? You know, if the intent is to generate money, I think some of the proposals have ideas that I think are lost causes. That's it. I think, you know, you have to hold people accountable. And I think you're letting people off the hook too quickly. That's all I wanted to say. But again, I want to reiterate my objection to congestion pricing. I pay enough in real estate taxes in this city, and now I'm getting penalized for living here and for wanting to use my car and go places. I just think it's just unfair. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone else from the public that hasn't already spoken. So let's go to the board and then we'll go back to the public. Let's begin with Lori, Ed, and then Michelle.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to make the first thing that I want to say is that if we are trying to get ideas from people with disabilities, I think that it is crucial that we have people with disabilities participating in this. And I would, if you're going to do this again, I would strongly ask that you approach a disability rights group and invite them to come and give their ideas, because there are a few of us who know some of the issues, including myself, but I certainly do not claim to know all of the possibilities and all of the issues. So that's number one. Number two, and this is really in no particular order, but the purpose of first of all, I am in favor of congestion pricing. So there you have it, I'm out there. The purpose of it, the stated purpose of congestion pricing is that it is in fact to build the elevators that we desperately need. There's only, as most of us know, only 25% of the system has elevators. And to, I think it was Erica's point, the MTA doesn't think about us. They do not think about of people with disabilities. And just the latest example of that is the Omni system. You know, like they've been saying for months and months and months that they're going to make the Omni system available to people with disabilities. Here it is. What month is this? October. And it's not happening. Okay, so I do agree with that. The MTA doesn't think about people with disabilities. So that's number two. Number three, I have many of the things that, like a half price Metro card, which I got when I was first, I've had multiple sclerosis for more than 20 years. And I made it my point when I was really in very bad shape, when I first got the disease, of like fighting for a half price Metro card. It wasn't easy. They said, oh, they made up all kinds of reasons why they weren't going to give it to me, but they finally did. And I had to fill out all kinds of paperwork. And to Elaine's objection about HIPAA, it's not HIPAA. If you want something from someone, you want, to be exempted from the congestion pricing thing, you have to give up something, and that something is you have to prove to them that you are disabled. Okay, so not only did I have to prove that I was disabled to get the half price Metro card, I also had to prove that I was disabled for the placard, which I also have. And it's just, if you want something, you don't get something for nothing. It's like, if you want it, you have to submit what they're asking for. So that's that. The only thing that I don't have, which is a possibility, is the license plate, because I do have a car. I park it in my garage, and I pay, not so handily, but I do pay for a garage every month. And I really use my car only to go out of the city. I almost never use it in the city because I use public transportation, because I think that that's what the whole idea is, that we should get used to using public transportation. Okay. The reason I don't have the license plate is because I just really never got around to it. But if I wanted to get it, I would have to prove that I was disabled for that. So that would make the license plate applicable to the no congestion pricing thing. Anyway, the last thing that I want to say about this is that people who are disabled, I do not believe that people who are disabled are making relatively frequent trips into the city to go see doctors. The reason I think that is because it's just so damn difficult. Now, if you have a private car, then you can get the license plate that says that you're disabled, okay? If you're coming into the city frequently to go to doctors and you don't have a private car, then there can be some sort of a identification of the vehicle that you are bringing into the city, whether it's an Uber or a Lyft, or, I agree that they are going to try and get out of it. And perhaps, I'm a big believer in technology, and technology can certainly, and I can't tell you how that this would work, but I am sure that there is a technological way to identify cars that are bringing in people with disabilities to go see their doctors. But again, I don't think that happens all that often, but I remain to be corrected. So basically that's really all that I have to say about this, is like, I think that it's a good idea. I don't want to be sitting in traffic for the rest of my life the way I frequently am. And it's just something that I think we're going to have to learn to live with. And if we can make the suggestion that people with disabilities should not be subject to it, that would be great. But I think we have to remember, well, first of all, we have to include people with disabilities in the discussion. And B, more importantly, is we have to remember that the whole idea of this is to make the system more accessible. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ed?
Laurie.
Did I interrupt you, Craig?
No, I was just thanking her.
Okay. Ed and then Barbara. I mean, sorry, Ed and then
Michelle and Barbara.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Alita. I'm sorry that I missed last month's meeting. And I am sorry, if you'll indulge me, that I missed the fireworks that was the last part of last month's full board meeting. And this is related because, as many on this board know, for the last 11 years that I've been on it, I have a son that he reminds me, has been brought to many of these community board meetings as a parent with a small child. He had to come, but you all frequently know that I have to go on to Long Island City because my son plays hockey. And so his practice is over there. So I had to leave, and I'm sorry to have missed the fireworks and the tabling of that motion. To Andrew Fine's part, just as a quick, just in general, these Zoom calls, in my humble opinion, are the worst thing for democracy going. This idea of muting people, Craig, the threat of muting, and the frequent love of muting that people who have the button are exercising in this community board and throughout the city and throughout this country, is eroding democracy in general. But focusing on the congestion pricing, I continue to oppose it for a multitude of reasons because it is incredibly regressive. But no one seems to care about that, because the fact of the matter is that if you're an elected official, you sure as heck want to start imposing fines, penalties, and fees, because rather than imposing taxes, because that is the death in terms of negative ads being run against you, in terms of losing your seat. Now, as to that, and with respect to disabilities, no one is even talking about the transportation deserts out there in the boroughs. And I don't know, yeah, we're going to build elevators. Yeah, that's decades from now. Okay, that's decades. So let's really try to talk about practical solutions and what's really going to happen. And I have yet to hear anything about unintended consequences. Some of the public has been very astute. Xavier Santiago, I don't know if he's on this call still, but I'm so happy, and some of the other folks who are in London, they try to conflate London and New York, and this is an island. And I've been battling elected officials in this city who are dreaming of a utopia of no cars. And to the point of how we get deliveries on this island without cars and trucks, I don't know. But the point is, the environmental alleged, and I have a lifetime of this and a graduate degree in environmental economics, the alleged environmental benefits of congestion pricing as spewed out there in the discourse, I'm dubious of, because of what I'm going to raise with respect to unintended consequences. Congressman Torres has raised this, and anybody who drives in this city knows this too, that if the road is blocked, you're going somewhere else. So if you don't want to get congestion pricing, you're going to go somewhere else. So you're going to have more traffic, more trucks out on the BQE, in the Triple Cantilever, and out on the Cross Bronx. That's not the issue here for tonight, but it is with respect to disability. It has been stated that this is a revenue raiser so that the capital budget can bond out in terms of getting money to actually build the subway. And you need to raise a steady amount of revenue in order to float bonds so that they can pay those bonds. And they need to get a certain amount of money. And the point is, back to my Zoom point, this has been done in such an opaque, dark fashion with no public input as to really the elephant in the room, which is what is going to be the toll amount? Because I've heard it thrown out there, we're talking about $9 to $23. Craig and I had this discussion at the fair. You all know me from the political sense. When you're offered up $23 as a public official, you're taking it. No one's going to be fine, going for the least amount of money. The other thing is, has been pointed out very keenly by those setting these fares, that the more you start carving out people, and rightfully so, I have no problem with carving out, but here's the problem. When you start carving out people and exemptions, the fare goes up. It has to, because you got to raise the revenue. You got to get to a certain number. And no one really wants to address that. Okay, that's the one elephant that I have yet to see anybody focus on. I'd love to see a meeting of this task force talking about the toll amount. I mean, I still say fight it, like with the redistricting. Okay, and the lady from the public, God bless you. Keep fighting. Keep saying you're against it. Absolutely. Do not stop saying it and don't accept it. Because it's coming and it's going to be much more onerous. And there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences. And I think the chair of CB11 pointed it out, and those who know, look, New Yorkers are very smart. If you're driving, you're going to, if you're living in Riverdale, if you're living north of the city, I live on 72nd, to the point. I'm going to get popped $23 to go 2 blocks to the 57th Street to get on the upper roadway. I get popped $23 twice a week just to take my kid to hockey. Or instead of getting a $23 pop, I have to go drive to the Triborough to go the long way around to get Long Island City. Well, that's great for the environment. So my point is unintended consequences here. People are going to come to the edge of the district and they're going to park their cars. To Chair Santiago's point, that's why that poor community board is getting hammered, because people stop. And that's what's going to happen here as we do away with more parking spots in this district. And I don't know about CB7, but we're going to have an inundation of cars parking and then people taking the subway from 68th Street, a couple blocks from me, or somewhere else. So let's talk about what are you going to do for parking? Okay, for those people who are going to try to game the system. And again,
may I interrupt for a second? Because
next
item, just let me say this, please. The next item, we'll talk about what our next focal points are going to be. These could be some of the discussions there that we have. So please just keep that in mind.
Thanks. All right. So the point is that with respect to the disability, I think there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences that nobody has even thought of or they want to avoid. And I'd like to see a little more focus on that. And I agree with the last speakers who have said that it is not our job. I mean, I got paid to do other things. Okay. What are they being paid to do? You know, at the MTA? I mean, you know, they have enough staffers over there, enough people, policy analysts to figure this out. I mean, what are they doing? And I agree with the other speaker who said maybe we should be proposing things to talk about rather than sitting around thinking of ideas ourselves. But I think that we need to focus on that and talk about, you know, what the unintended consequences are. How do we practically deal with that? And think of some of those, because it's coming. I hope it's not coming. And I think that we should be clear-eyed about what people will do, again, in a practical sense. But what concerns me most of all is that many of these ideas are cooked up in graduate schools, and I'm guilty. I have my MPA, so I'm guilty of that. But this sounds like a bad seminar class, 3 hours a week, by a bunch of people who, you know, live outside of New York, who have cooked up this idea because it looks great on paper, and they all look great on paper. As Kevin Costner said in JFK, you know, theoretical physics could have an elephant dangling from a dandelion over a cliff by his tail without falling down, theoretically. You know, that's an absurd example, but the point is made, I think. So that is all I would like to express, and just also the dismay and the absolute, I can't even think of the adjectives for a public meeting with nice people on it to use. My longshoreman tendencies come to mind with what I heard transpired at the full board meeting. It's outrageous and a complete insult. And to Andrew Fine, who started this, I see you down there. I'm with you, brother. I give you the fist bump, because you, my friend, are absolutely, yeah, buddy. You are absolutely dead on, absolutely right. The lack of respect by that move is appalling and shocking. And anybody who thinks that that is okay, anybody who alleges to serve the public and thinks something like that is okay and is behavior that should be rewarded and agreed with, I find that appalling and shocking. Who've been in public service from when I was a kid, and brown people, that is not the essence of democracy at any level. And I'm sorry I have no solutions, because you know, my solution would be not do this and have the politicians actually show the guts to put the taxes in place to tax the people who can afford this tax, instead of putting it on people who cannot and people who are forced to deal with it. And again, to the practicalities with the taxis and all of these things, what are they going to do? I mean, I shudder for the TLC folks I mean, I've yet to hear an answer as to, how many times they're going to get popped going back and forth into the system. So I'm sorry I don't have solutions, but I just wanted to throw that out there for the discourse. I frequently disappear behind, ironically, the 59th Street Bridge behind me, but I am here, so you'll see me. But it's no disrespect, but you don't need to see this shirt, and I have other shirts, as I've said over the years. And I beg and plead for our elected officials to finally do what the president has done and declare this horrid pandemic over. And we have to meet in person. Oh, the horror of it, because I think that we would get a lot further and a lot faster if all of us had to show up in person. And I'll stop and I'll get off the soapbox. And thank you all and have a great night. And even as a Cardinal fan, I wish those who are Yankee and Met fans, sort of, kind of, best of luck as the playoffs begin tomorrow evening. So thank you all. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Ed. But what you made me think of is that wouldn't it be ironic if pushing diesel trucks onto the Cross Bronx Expressway increased the incidence of asthma and therefore increased the incidences of disability at the same time that they're trying to clean everything up? So there are ironies all threaded through this, but
that's not an irony. That's not an irony, Alita. That's a tragedy.
It's an
ironic. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy brought about by academics who have no practical experience or don't take into account practicalities and unintended consequences.
Well, I'll refer people to the episode of Brian Lara that I'm really bad at names, that the head of the MTA was on, in terms of his approach to some of the issues that Ed and others have raised. Nevertheless, let's go to Michelle and Barbara and then Mohit. Thank you. Mohit. Michelle.
Thank you. To pick off where I left off, where I mentioned that the disability placards will suffice for those who can file with the state. The rest of it will be a real problem for privacy. The idea of a code, which Dylan mentioned, is a good one. But in order to have this code, you again have to file. There are people who go for regular doctor's visits. And sometimes a regular doctor's visit can mean once a week. It can be to many different doctors over the course of a month. They do not necessarily qualify as disabled. They will not be able to get placards that show them to be disabled. And if they were to have a code, they would have to reveal where they are going every time they go somewhere in order to qualify for not having to pay the toll. I think this is a big issue for privacy. Let me also mention the accessorized. Accessorized, which is extremely inefficient when it uses its own cars. They are notorious for being late, and most people that use them do use them for doctor's appointments and things where there's a punctuality issue. They're notoriously late, and to recognize this, in its infinite wisdom, the MTA did put into effect the possibility where accessorized uses taxis. And when you call accessorized, you can say, I'd like a taxi authorization, please. That would now put you in a regular commercial taxi, and you would have no way of being identified as an accessorized user. Now, I have no doubt that with electronics, that there is a way to put tracking systems on the transporter, on the person who's being transported, that there are codes, that there are all kinds of things. I think the issue can be solved. Never would it be perfect. Never would it not have unintended consequences. But the issue is why? It is such a convoluted, over-the-top effort to make something work that will not necessarily work. One of the reasons is pollution. One of the reasons that it's advocated is pollution. Now, if you move the cars into an adjoining zone, do you think that the air pollution is going to look down and say it's 59th Street? We're not allowed to go past this. I mean, if you increase the pollution north of 59th Street, it's only air. Air has an airflow. It's going to go right back into the central business district. It's just nonsense to think that there would be any real impact on air pollution if you just seek to eliminate traffic within a certain area. Air moves, it belongs to everybody. The other thing is, I do not think we should throw up our hands and say that congestion pricing is a done deal. I don't believe that it necessarily is. I believe that elections are coming and elections matter, and that with these elections, there are alternatives to congestion pricing. I don't think it's a done deal. And I'm very concerned that if any resolution comes out of this committee tonight, I'm not so sure I want to see one, but if there is one, without acknowledging that we are recommending this in light of the fact that we are opposed to congestion pricing, I'm not sure I would support it. Because to me, that's throwing up your hands and just trying to, you know, come up with alternatives for them when you think that the whole project is ill thought. So I just bear that in mind, that I want to make that point. You know, all of these points were made in our resolution, every one of them, about disability, about congestion, about pollution. Every one of them were made in that resolution, which apparently were never, it's shunned. We could never speak of it again. But the overriding sentiment there was that we were opposed to this. And let me make one other general comment, my observation. I recognize it's empirical, but it's my observation. We represent the community. I don't think that our votes represent the community. We can listen to I submit that if we went door to door, business to business, and we actually polled people, what do they think about bike lanes? What do they think about congestion pricing? What do they think about a lot of things? I submit that you will get people opposed to these programs. They don't come out in masses. We'll get 10, you know, on a topic, 12 on a topic, some really hot ones. You'll get 100 for whatever reason. But I submit that we are not representing the community. We are representing the personal interests and opinions of the people on this community board. And that's how the vote goes. I don't know how to solve this. We are not a polling company. I don't know how we could conceivably go door to door and actually take real inventory, but I don't think we are representing the community at all. I think the votes go the way the personal opinions go on this board. That may be true of others, I'm not sure. But at any rate, it's very sad to me to see things that I think are a general disservice to the people in our community that do not benefit them. And some of the vocally strong do come out and speak, but they're not necessarily in enough numbers to make a vote. And ultimately, they don't get a vote. That's the real issue. If you really let them come and vote on the issue, as just the board members do, I suspect you'd get a lot of different outcomes. At any rate, I'm not giving up on congestion pricing. I am hoping to defeat it. I will do all that I personally can to do that. And I submit I'm not happy about a resolution tonight, but if there is one, I wanted to acknowledge that this committee has voted against congestion pricing, and we're only offering this out as a backup. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara?
I have a few things to say. First of all, I have to answer the one that went on and on and on and on about the snow melt is my issue. I promise not to to reiterate over the years why I will vote against it. I am totally offended as I walk the streets that our streets are so noisy. They are broken up from construction, and from some entitled people that have a few feet to do it will spend 2 weeks per house to break them up. That's my issue. I'll vote no, and I won't have Andrew ranting on and on. The second of all, in terms of this committee, I did not come to the last committee, but I have been frustrated with issues, as you know, Alita, along the way, whether it's outdoor dining or whatever, that we are a community board that says no, and I'm happy that we met to address it. We also are a community board that would love to undo things that have already been there. And if things take a long time, it's because people, which I'm doing now, and I hope I don't usually do, run on and raged and spend time doing that. The third thing that I am particularly upset with now is the nerve of anybody that says that this is a regressive system and that we should tax people, and that's called progressive. Maybe my vocabulary is right, and maybe I don't understand what regressive and progressive means, but I have a major disability. I don't talk about it as much as others, but I have extreme macular degeneration. I have not driven in 20 years. I am really disabled because of it, and I try to live my life. So I am one of the disabled people. But to say that because I take public transportation and I walk and I don't own a car, that I should pay for some entitled people want to flit around in their car is something that I am outraged with. And I'm sorry, that is not my definition of what regressive and progressive are, and shame on us for saying that. The other is, I don't remember it was, that said the community spoke, 12 of us. I do a lot of talking about it. I am a pretty boring person. I talk about issues. 90% of the people I deal with want congestion pricing. And for anybody to say that they know for sure that it won't affect, that the environment will be affected negatively, go back to when COVID started. I remember standing on my terrace and couldn't believe the color of the sky and birds singing and so on. The assumption is nobody will give up their cars. People will give up their cars. Maybe not some of the people on Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue and so on, but people will not drive as much if they don't have to. I knew there was somebody that went down to Chinatown to get the hem of her pants fixed. She would double park and it was saved a couple of dollars. Maybe she won't go down to Chinatown. And the last thing I will say is I'm not against elevators. I would like to put the emphasis on buses. I had to go to a doctor's appointment today. I had to be there at 9. I left extra early at 8. I left on 86th Street, the 2nd Avenue Select bus. 4 minutes later, the bus came. I was down at 42nd Street and 2nd Avenue in 14 minutes. That's faster than any train will take you and any car would take you. And people that talk about disabilities, first of all, I have to say, for those that want to drive a car and be disabled, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't want to talk about anybody specific, but if you have the type of illness that maybe you would have a seizure or something, you shouldn't be driving. I've heard 3 people in recent time that were run over by cars. One of my bus trips I took, luckily I was sitting, a cab 2 times, once a cab and another car went right in front of it. Cars are very dangerous and we need less of them on the street. And I believe strongly that there will be less coming on. As tolls, I know people that were coming in New Jersey take the bus instead of driving their car because parking is so expensive and all of that. So I would like to, and then I have one thought of suggestion. If we do take an Uber and you really are legitimate, although I have a problem because it's like shelter, like support dogs. Everybody and their brother has a support dog so they can take them all over. I'm afraid that people want to go to the movies. They're going to say, all right, I'll use my card, but I'm not worried about anything like that. I'm not going to go into that. If you really legitimately have a medical thing, can we say that you would get the money back? I think the idea of some sort of technology to say that the Uber would, there's something about the car and press that it's a medical you have a medical problem or something like that, can maybe eliminate it along the way. There's ways of handling it for legitimate people along the way. I won't get one because I don't think I need it, but I am disabled, I have to say. Some of you may see me squinting into the screen. So that's my rant. I'm sorry.
Got a rant. It's okay, Barbara.
Mhm.
Okay, Moed, I'm sorry about your name again. And after you, I think let's go to.
I thought we had Elizabeth Rose who had her hand up. I don't know if she put it down or not.
She does. She has it up, but it's passed. I know it was up earlier. I think Elizabeth, we could.
Yeah.
Let's just stick in the order that it is in now, if that's okay.
Right, yeah. Mohit and then Elizabeth, I thought is how it was.
Yeah, and then after that, again, people who haven't yet spoken, that would be Billy and Judy. So let's do it in that order, please. Zachary, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Alita. You got my name perfectly right. So
Thank
no
you.
worries, no worries there. I have a resolution that I'm happy to speak to if it is seconded. It's similar to last month. It's lengthy. I'm happy to put it in the chat and for people to look at it. I will also read it as well. So is that okay with everyone, with the co-chairs?
Okay with me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just send it to me and I'll post it in the chat.
And then in the meantime, after you send it, you could.
Well,
you
maybe
could have,
it's easier. I think it's easier for people to read unless it comes with a link. If you have it and you could share your screen.
Yeah, that's true also.
Either way, I can share screen as well. No problem there.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the ability to share screen now. So
okay.
And please read it just for the record.
Of course.
Okay, you can share screen.
Nope, it's not what I wanted to share. Let me, because I made a small edit in this what I put into Zoom. So let me share that part. Give me 2 seconds. That's the risk of doing things in real time. Here, let me copy the right. There we go. Now let me share that. Okay. Perfect. There should be 4 parts, not 5. I was working on this in real time and merged a couple of things together. So, okay. So similar to last time, I apologize for writing complex resolutions. I think that is something I should work on not doing as much. But what I'm trying to do here is address a lot of what we've heard from today. So let me just read it. I know it has to be seconded before I can really speak to it. Let me read it first. Let it be resolved that 1, the MTA shall impanel a council on mobility for individuals with disabilities to address challenges while using public transit and the impact of congestion pricing on individuals with disabilities. Part 2, the MTA shall develop a viable, easy to use method for individuals who are temporarily or permanently disabled, comprehensively defined, to seek exemptions while taking TLC rides. This method should protect privacy and be available online or offline. Part 3, the MTA shall report annually on data on how individuals with temporary or permanent disabilities travel into and out of the CBD. And part 4, revenue from congestion pricing shall be heavily prioritized for improving transit access.
All right. Is there a second to that resolution or proposed resolution? I see Lori giving a thumbs up.
And Elizabeth, so there are seconds. So if you'd like to speak to it, go right ahead.
Perfect, thank you. So there's a couple things here. There were obviously multiple threads of concern that were raised in today's meeting that I think were really important. And I'm with this resolution really trying to get at a few of those. So first is the issue of temporary versus permanent disability. So you'll notice that in part 2 in particular, which is that I've torn an Achilles tendon before. I know how hard it is to get around without access to I know how hard it is to access public transit when you have a mobility challenge like that. So so I think it's important that the temporarily disabled also be included in any program that is designed here. Number 2 here, I think kind of conceptually includes the idea put forward by Dylan around, whether it's some kind of code or QR or whatever, so that when a TLC vehicle goes under one of these gantries, that, if that passenger has an exemption, then that ride is not charged. Okay. So the other, key issue that we heard about today is that individuals who are disabled really access transit in 3 different modes, either private vehicle, car hire, or public transit. And we know that, okay, so let me just speak to those 3 modes specifically. The first mode, I'm not addressing here. We did hear some concerns from the public about placards and plates and city versus state. So those are, issues that I'm happy to add, to take constructive amendments here. But in terms of the other 2 categories there, so car hires, excuse me, and public transit, this is the very last point here on number 4 is that, one of the key rationales behind congestion pricing is that we need to improve public transit. And because of the disparate impact on individuals with disabilities, we need to make sure that improvement is prioritized for that community. So that's where number 4 is coming from. And then on car hire, so that's really where number 2 is coming from. Just on number 3, very briefly, I think it's very important. This is just kind of a personal interest of mine, that we really have the data we need in order to make informed decisions. And so number 3 is really trying to get at that. So that's a brief summary of this resolution. If happy to take questions or let others, opine on this as well.
All right, thank you very much. I think that's a really good starting point for discussion.
Zachary, if you do want to put this in the chat, then I can stop sharing and actually look at people again. But
Yeah, no,
I'm happy to keep this up for a few more minutes if that's helpful.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Next, I think we have Elizabeth.
We do,
and
and
Judy,
then
and then Paul.
Judy and Paul. Yeah.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Alita. First of all, I apologize. I have been bounced out of the meeting twice. So that is why my hand has been sometimes up and then I've disappeared. It has literally been challenging for me to stay on this meeting. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm now on my cell phone rather than my computer. I have a couple of thoughts from listening so far this evening. One, and this is, I think, embedded in one of Moit's points, is that there needs to be, in addition to or instead of license plates as the basis for the charging of the congestion pricing toll, there needs to be something that could be personally carried by individuals who would receive exemptions for whatever reason, or discounts. Because one solution is exemption, another solution is simply a different rate. So some sort of, whether it is a personal smart card or a transponder that could be read by the gantry. I have very vivid memories of I used to carry around my own toll tokens so that when I was in a taxi, rather than the taxi getting in line to pay the token at the toll booth, I simply would hand the taxi the tokens that I carried around with me and go to the token lane. That's an old-fashioned example, but it's a similar concept where it's the passenger who can have their token, their transponder, their smart card be the item that is used to determine the toll, not the car license plate. Another thing that we've talked about or heard a great deal about this evening is the necessity for people to go into the central business district for a variety of different services. And so this may be a friendly amendment. I also think that as part of congestion pricing, that we should call upon New York City and state to identify every reason why individuals are required to enter the central business district that is controlled by New York City or state, and call upon them to make all of those services available entirely online or create alternative locations outside of the central business district that are more easily accessible for people. Because there are 2 pieces to this. It's not just how many people are going in, but why do we need to go in the first place? Why can't we also address this for people by having many of the reasons you might be going downtown exist elsewhere in the city outside of the district? And certainly to the extent that New York City and state offices or services are only accessible in certain locations. Those locations need to move and
Elizabeth-
change.
Sorry, Elizabeth, just to clarify, you mean that, let's say you have a hearing in the oath office downtown, or a court date, those are only accessible their way downtown. So that would apply to people with disabilities, or just anyone who has to be down there?
I'm not going to impose that specific distinction, but effectively I'm saying there should be no reason why somebody would be required, and maybe it can be restricted to somebody who would specifically require door-to-door transportation. But why should somebody have to go into the central business district for various city services, put them all out of central business district in addition to as well, or make it all accessible remotely? The technology is there. I actually believe that, other examples that people have talked about medical offices and other things, I actually believe there's a real potential for migration of many of those practices outside of the central business district as well. But we can't legislate that. That would simply be the market. But I think we should be able to legislate that and demand that for all city business, period. There should be nothing that requires somebody who requires door-to-door transportation to enter the central business district that is controlled by the city or state. And then finally, and I don't think I've actually heard this yet, there are multiple examples of congestion pricing around the world. And while many countries are not as conscious of people with disabilities as the United States, are there any examples of mitigation that have been used for people with disabilities in other locations? Do we have a list of them? What are they? And how can we bring those into the conversation? So those are my thoughts from listening to this evening's conversation. And thank you. And thank you, Mohit, for a very rational proposed resolution.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So that raises a couple of points for me. One is that the listing of other or any mitigation techniques in other areas brings to mind what Lori had said about inviting a disability rights organization. They may have more information about that. And two, for people who need door-to-door transportation, are we willing to equate people who may not technically be disabled but need that, or elderly people? Do they count? To people who've had cesarean sections? Do people who have I guess that would be maybe a temporary disability? How? And I know that that Mohit in his resolution talked about being very comprehensively defined for those terms. So it's just something to either clarify or not clarify and leave it as comprehensively or broadly defined. I think I'm just thinking aloud, so I will stop with that. Let's go to, thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Alita, I'm happy to incorporate Elizabeth's suggestion as a number 5. I don't know if we want to keep adding to this. I just typed something up. I can send it to Zach, who can add it to the chat.
Yeah, let's just get the wording. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, so I just sent it to Zach. He'll send it around. I'll read it out as well. So number 5, the city and state shall offer alternatives for individuals who are temporarily or permanently disabled to receive city or state services that are currently in the CBD from having to pay the congestion pricing toll. So that could be through online services, through different locations for where these services are delivered from, et cetera.
I with the examples specifically of online services or alternative locations, I appreciate that, and I agree with it.
Okay, yep, I can add that as a comma too. Yep, right.
Okay, then Judy and Paul.
Thank you. It's been an interesting conversation. Thank you, Mohit, for the resolution. I just want to make a comment, whether we vote yes, whether we vote no tonight, no matter how we vote, we must list the reasons for why we're voting, what we need, which we're doing right now. Mohit's resolution is positive, but it's listing specifics. Should the board end up voting no again, then that must also list the reasons why. You just can't say no. You have to tell them why you're voting the way you're voting. I found that out over 30 years ago when we started our neighborhood association. So I just wanted to add that piece of advice. Mohit, I have a question for you on item number 4. Do you think that you should add in there, in addition, something specifically about handicapped elevators?
You know, I'm not opposed to that. I did hear, was it?
I mean, because we keep coming back to that, and everybody at the full board and everybody keeps bringing that up. I know it's a very expensive cost, but I think if we don't specifically spell that out as a great need for seniors, for handicapped, for a whole bunch of people, that it's children, maybe young children, it's important.
Yeah, I
Everybody
definitely
else feels.
Yep, I definitely understand that perspective. I think that's my perspective as well. But I also, you know, am able-bodied and don't want to speak for the disability community, and don't want to suggest that there aren't alternatives that may be also really important. Improved bus lanes, or better boarding of buses, or more accessorized vehicles. All of this.
Yeah, no, I think they need to look at all of those things, including handicapped elevators. If we could put that in as a, an addition. I don't know, Craig and Alita.
I would think that the disability community, that has been their #1 priority for many years, to make the entire New York subway system fully accessible, and we're still far away from that, reaching that goal. And I think it's always been assumed that funding revenues from congestion pricing would help contribute to that. I think by stating that we want to prioritize making, and whether you want to say elevator specifically, but making the subway system fully accessible, I think that maybe that's the language.
Okay. I'll leave it up to you folks. That was just my thought.
Yeah, and fully accessible means, so using my favorite example, 86 and Lex, an elevator to 1 out of 4 platforms is not fully accessible.
Yes, and the elevator is costing $146 million. So at least the headline that I clipped today, that's what it said.
Okay, yep, I'm happy to take that suggestion. So here's the amended number 4.
All right, very good. Next, we have Paul Crickler.
Thank you, co-chairs. Speaking as one of the 80% of people in this borough who does not own a car, I'm fully in favor of congestion pricing. I do think that the resolution, as written and amended, with all the comments to date, does a really good job of accomplishing what I think we need to accomplish tonight. I won't go on more than that. I think it's a great resolution, including your suggestion, Craig, about the language about not being too specific. So I'll vote for it.
All right, thank you.
So
all right.
Billy has not spoken yet from the board. Oh no, I'm sorry, he doesn't have his hand raised. Never mind. We've covered, I think, all the board members and public members who've spoken once, and we could go back to, I'd say, tell me if you agree, Craig, back to the public first who've spoken, and then to the board members who've spoken.
Sure, and if we can just try to be brief at this point, if at all possible.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thanks again. I made it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak again. As well-intentioned as this resolution might be, I really question who is really listening aside from us. I don't know what impact this makes on the general public. I want to say thank you to Ed Herzog, who was spot on. Thank you very much. And also to Xavier Santiago from CB11, who appeared to, oh yeah, fist pound, Ed, thank you. Xavier Santiago, who I believe resolved, like we did just last month, to reject the concept of congestion pricing outright. To Erica's concern, and as Michael Murray pointed out, Uber, no problem. Uber is going to be just fine. Actually, Uber loves congestion pricing. Uber will almost certainly get an exemption from congestion pricing and undermine the entire purpose of congestion pricing, because we're only looking at a 5% reduction in traffic with congestion pricing in the zone. And once Uber is exempt, and they already ran over all the yellow cabs, they've run over the government, and they're going to run us over too. And by the way, it's a much, much dirtier version of transportation, because they sit around and idle for 8 or 10 hours a day for 8 or 10 rides. I'd also like to say that this exercise that we're undertaking this evening, 2 hours and change into it, is exactly what the community board chairman, Russell, wants us to do. He wants us to spin our wheels. We were summarily disregarded and disrespected last full board meeting in 9 seconds flat. We debated for 4 hours last month to come up with a resolution, which he simply tabled after 3 or 4 hours on the full board. So then you're at 7 hours, and here we are a couple more hours. Now we're up to 9 hours. Lori Boris, I see you there. I understand. Hi, and by the way, you've done a great job parenting. I'll say that. Your son's fantastic. I understand where people are coming from, where they think that congestion pricing will build the elevators. They will improve mass transit. It's not happening. If we need $1 billion a year, you simply have to enforce the fare. People are jumping turnstiles at record numbers. That's $500 million right there. There's $200 to $300 million on the back of buses, people jumping inside of there. And then you have all the paper plates, fake plates, and no plates that go through the Triborough and everywhere else. So the money is there. The MTA is going to come after the honest people. They're penalizing honest taxpayers that register and insure their cars and have real license plates and real registration stickers. It's a shame. And the reality is that if I was gonna make a proposal to resolve, aside from saying 100%, whatever resolution comes out of this committee should absolutely positively reflect what the committee said just last month. That should be the preface to any resolution that's made. And secondly, I would say, oh, I didn't throw this part in. By the way, London is a complete disaster. I have clients in London. And again, Uber and Lyft have run over London. They were exempted. They got reduced numbers. And there is more congestion in the central business district of London now than ever. But it's been really, really good for raising money and alienating people. But finally, if you're going to resolve, resolve to have the resolution from last month as preface. B, the only concession I would make is that you should toll bridges like the 3rd Avenue Bridge, the Willis Avenue Bridge, the Madison Avenue Bridge, so on and so forth, 59th Street Bridge, at the same rate as the Triborough Bridge. Give that money to the MTA. That's all we can give them. And resolve to have the MTA actually collect the fares. And that's basically what I've got to say. I could go all night, believe me. But thank you for listening. And thank you, Ed. Thank you, Alita. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for siding with sanity, because the reality is this is a really bad idea. We never voted on this at all. This was in the 2019 budget. It was like a late night, last minute deal so that the Albany lawmakers could get out of town, and there were no details. And the same budget had great ideas like bail reform. We see how that's turned out. So bottom line is, let's side with sanity. Let's resolve to reject this. And if they want to toll, just toll the bridges. It's logical. I'm just siding with common sense. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you guys at least look at this the right way. Thank you.
Okay, as Craig said, let's just try and no, it's okay, Andrew, and focus on the disability or comments about the resolution proposed. Michael, Erica, and then we'll go back to the board, starting with Lori. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I missed Evelyn and Dylan again, and then we'll go back to Lori. So Michael, Erica, go ahead, please. One at a time.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
My first point about the resolution is that while it mentions TLC vehicles, it makes no mention of people with disabilities, private vehicles, and those are just as important. And just a couple of other points. A lot of this conversation is about people with disabilities going to medical appointments. And that's important, but that's not all it is. Because if you live outside the zone and you want to go see a play in the theater district, or go to the South Street Seaport, or otherwise take advantage of what's available in the Central Business District. Or if you live in the Central Business District and you're not healthy enough to take public transportation, and you want to go to Stu Leonard's in Yonkers or visit relatives on Long Island. So it's about the right to travel for people with disabilities. And again, going back to what I said before, for the sake of the politics, it really makes sense for the people outside the zone and the people inside the zone to get together and partner on these issues, because the effects are mirror image. Somebody talked about air moving around, and that's absolutely true. And for, if the people outside the zone don't like congestion pricing, and the people inside the zone don't like congestion pricing, then nobody likes it. And that makes it that much more ridiculous that it gets public support. So I would again endorse what Andrew said about the MTA collecting the fares. And I would also suggest that there need to be more audits of the MTA and better mechanisms in place to see to it that they actually get good mileage out of all the money they already get. They're always going to ask for more cash. No matter how much cash they get from congestion pricing, they'll find reasons to ask for more. The money will disappear down a black hole and will be in the same spot. Finally, I'm a trained University of Chicago economist, and one person spoke about progressive versus regressive. Regressive are taxes that fall most heavily on those at the bottom of the economic ladder, at least proportionally. Progressive taxes and fees fall more heavily, at least proportionally, those at the upper end of the spectrum in terms of wealth and income. So congestion pricing is definitely regressive in that the people at the lower end of the scale are the people least able to pay the higher fees. And the people at the higher end in terms of wealth and income, it's just another cost for them. They won't care. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we will take up financing and MTA's use of any funds raised if this goes through at another meeting. So there'll be ample opportunity to talk about the many, many financial issues and concerns that there are and that this community board has expressed as well.
And I was just going to ask Mohit if he intended to include Uber and Lyft and transportation network companies in there, if it was specific to yellow taxis.
I know Mo, is he here?
Hey.
Oh, there he is. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just had to take care of something. Yeah, so just going back to that point that was raised on yellow taxis versus Ubers and Lyfts. I'm not sure what the term is in New York City. I've heard of TNC before, Transportation Network Company, as the phrase for Uber and Lyft. So happy to use whatever the appropriate phrasing is to make sure that we fully include car hire services in the resolution.
Thank you. Okay, Erica.
Thank you. There's a couple of follow-ups to the draft language, but one, I want to just qualify what what is covered by HIPAA. Applying for applications for things is not covered by HIPAA. Your doctor to your insurance company is covered by HIPAA. I've worked on this since HIPAA was implemented. I've been the HIPAA privacy officer at companies. It is between you and your doctor and your insurance company, you and your insurance company. HIPAA has nothing to do with when you self-identify with something. There's a difference between HIPAA and feeling like you've gone for a colonoscopy to apply for an application for something, but that's not HIPAA, and they're not governed by HIPAA. The one thing that I would say in this draft proposal is that it needs to be timely, and they need to define timely, because as anybody knows that has dealt with a government agency, be it local, city, federal, they operate on their own timelines for things. And if this moves forward, like I anticipate it will, we can't be sitting for months, years, waiting for applications to go through to get, to get either the passes or the fob or whatever it might be. In addition, on the back end, if they make it a reimbursement system, it also can't be weeks. It needs to be, it's 2022, almost 2023. All this stuff can be automated for the people that have that capability. And for the people that don't, which is, a smaller part of the population, but there needs to be something built into the what ifs and wherefores about not just doing it, but in a timely fashion. And to everybody's point, once something is out of the gate with the MTA, we all know this, it's not a secret. There's no stuffing that horse back in the barn, and there's no accountability on the back end. So, I still think it's worth putting it in there that we need accountability, but there needs to be some language in this draft proposal about how long it should take to get whatever it might look like. Because applications for government stuff goes into a black hole. And I fully agree that if this is about the MTA, which we all know it is and has nothing to do with actual air quality, because we know buildings infinitely emit have more negative impact on the air in New York City than cars do at this point. So there needs to be something that's included. And my last thing is, I take issue and I feel personal affront that somebody here on this call just said that people shouldn't be going to the central business district, that things should be moved out of the central business district, or why do they need to go there? Frankly, it's nobody else's business why I need to go see my parents and drive through or take an Uber through.
I don't think that was the point, Erica, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's how it came across. It's
Oh,
more than just the central business district. It is that part that's going to be told, but it's where we live. It's the home that we live in, and we shouldn't be taxed again to take our streets. And Uber, regardless of what Andrew said, because I know also about the car hire services, a lot about them, aren't exempt. Like when you get in a taxi below 96th Street and you automatically start with 380, the same thing is happening for Uber. And as the kids say, I have the receipts for it.
I just want to, I hope I'm not out of line, but explain the way I heard the comments about the central business district. It's for reasons where the government makes you show up, and they shouldn't make you show up and then and then charge you for it.
But
So
it's total, since they introduced this in 29, one of the things we can push back on is work has changed.
That's correct.
Work has completely changed since 2019. Office buildings are way more than half empty at this point.
That's correct, but I don't think the idea of invading privacy was part of it. It's more that the government can't tell you. I don't know, there must be a definition of chutzpah that applies to this. The government can't tell you to show up and then charge you extra for it.
Right, so we should include that somewhere in it. Frankly, that's one. Two is that work has changed. The face of work has changed completely.
Thank you. We'll go, I guess, back to and see if Moet wants to think about any of this in the meantime. He's very good at incorporating everything. Let's go to Evelyn and Dylan, and then back to the board. Evelyn?
Evelyn, if you're here, you can unmute.
Maybe while she's doing that, we could go to, in the interest of time, Dylan, and then come back to Evelyn.
Okay.
Evelyn, if you unmute in the meantime, just hold your horses till Dylan's done. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to very quickly voice my support for the resolution as a member of the public. I think it addresses a lot of the points brought up very well, and I like it as currently written. I also wanted to just very, very briefly, I don't want it to be a big thing, touch on the point of progressive versus regressive. I agree that this would be a regressive tax if it were just the same fee being applied to everyone. But that's not necessarily the case, because in New York City, and true for a lot of other places, but especially true for New York City, on the whole, though there are exceptions, people who drive more tend to be higher income, people who have cars tend to be higher income, and people who take more frequent trips into the city or more frequent Uber, Lyft, or whatever tend to be higher income. So I would also push back on it being called regressive by that definition. However, the point of it I wanted to focus on was just support for the resolution as written. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Evelyn, how are you working on the unmuting? Is she unmuted, Zachary?
No, she's still not unmuted.
We'll come back to her. Let's go back to board members, Lori, Michelle, Barbara, Ed. Oh, Leah, we'll come back to you in a minute. Lori?
I'm going to call the question though. Do you want to go to her?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And I see Barbara frantically waving. So could you hold that for a second until Barbara speaks? But let's go to Leah first. Is that all right, Lori?
Lita, I would love to maybe drop in a slightly revised resolution to respond to some of the feedback.
Sure. And then, yeah, hang on one second. Let's just hear what Leah has to say. And then if we could go, Russell hasn't spoken. I think he's just raised his hand. So if we could do that. I know we're way out of order, but I appreciate that. It's just because of how we're going. So, Leah?
This is a very minor technical point, but this is a regressive tax. Rich people may take more trips. Sales taxes are regressive. Rich people buy more stuff. but it's a much smaller percentage of their income than poor people. And the burden therefore is heavier for poor people. And this is a very similar situation. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Let's focus, if we can, also on the resolution, because Lori's already called the question. So let's hear from Russell and then Barbara, and then we'll go back to Lori. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Russell, go.
Thanks. So as I understand the comment, and I mean, my own view also, I think we're still being too specific on number 2 with regard to TLC ride or whatever the other acronym was. I mean, it seems to me anybody who has a disability should be exempt, even if they're taking their own vehicle. They shouldn't have to take a taxi to get the exemption, or an Uber, or whatever it is. So I would, suggest that we just take out the reference to TLC ride or the, broader acronym that includes Uber or whatever, and just say, ride or something along those lines. And I would suggest that as an amendment, or hopefully a friendly amendment.
But you know what, I hope this is all right with you, Craig, because Mohit has talked about revising the resolution. Barbara, before we go back to you, and then Lori, if we could just look at that, and then maybe your comments are relevant to that, if that's all right.
I appreciate that, Alita. So I'll.
Could you share your screen again?
Yes, I can do that.
And is it possible to just highlight the parts that you've revised so that we could see what those are? Oh, the whole thing. Never
No,
mind.
sorry, that's mine.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just underline what's new. Give me 2 seconds to read through it together. Part 1 has not changed. Part 2, I've added timely and TNC and personal vehicles. So that addresses Russell's comment. 3 has not changed. 4, I had inexplicably forgotten disabled individuals, so that part is new, and then the second half there is new, and then 5, I mean, all of 5 is new essentially, because it's what we talked about with Elizabeth.
Okay, Zachary, thank you very much for pointing that out and doing that so quickly. Could you, Zachary, could you put that in the chat, and then?
Sure.
Thanks. And then I know, because I always have a thing about calling the question when people are so eager. So just Barbara and Michelle, really, really quickly, if you will, and then Lori. Thank you.
Sorry, I said Barbara.
Barbara, and then Michelle. Is Ed frantically raising
I'm
his
not going
hand?
to say what I was saying for the sake of time. I second Lori, and I'm going to third and fourth Lori's calling the question. So I think it's time to do it. I can't imagine anything new there.
I don't know what you're
doing. I have things to say, but I'm not going to say it. I'm not.
Okay.
It's adding a few things that could be said at other times. It's late.
Thank you. And I don't know what Ed is doing. Could you chat Zachary, and then he could chat Craig and me with what your comment is, because I don't know what your gestures mean.
Yes,
Michelle?
I do have something new. This is why I hate Zoom. I do have something new. Yes. So I will wait my turn patiently, but
Thank
yes,
you.
I do have something to add. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Michelle. And thank you, Lori. Michelle.
Thank you. 2 things. One is that, and I appreciate if you're going to do this at a separate meeting, but I just wondered if either one of you knew how the theater industry and the restaurants are reacting to this, because they will be a desert. Theater is going to take a very big hit, and these are the things that financially drive our city. And a good portion of the theater goers and subscription goers are from the Upper East and Upper West Side. And it's those subscriptions and continuity of attending theater, not once a year for the new musical, that really maintains that industry. And that's also true for the restaurants. that are in the congestion zone. So I wonder if they're organizing in the same way that they might have, for the sheds, if they were taking a stance on this, because they're going to take a very heavy hit on this.
Yeah,
With respect to
I think that's a topic for later.
I just wondered if you knew if there was any
know a
movement by
little.
them.
I do know a little bit. I know that the Chamber of Commerce has testified, and I've spoken to the president of the Chamber of Commerce, well, emailed really, and there's a concern that it's not timely because New York hasn't recovered. And
exactly,
that's the Madison Avenue bid. They're very concerned that people out of the zone or within the zone will be hit by high taxi fares coming into the zone to frequent restaurants or shops, and I would say potentially cultural organizations as well. So there are those concerns with people for taxis, but Craig is right. We'll take that up at another time.
I think we should. I want to say something about this resolution. I had said early on, I would like this resolution to acknowledge the fact that this committee voted against congestion pricing. So the opening to this, whereas the congestion pricing committee or task force has voted in opposition to the congestion pricing program, should it be implemented, we recommend the following. So will Mohit take that as a friendly suggestion?
Well, wait, can I just first say that we don't vote by committee on this,
but it's a true statement. That's true.
One at a time, Michelle. Let Craig finish.
A committee vote doesn't have standing.
But
so,
it's true what you said.
This is eventually going to become a community board resolution. So why would we reference what a task force did?
Because you're acknowledging what happened in truth at this committee, and the resolution was tabled, so it never got acted upon. And very often when, I'm not saying that this is the case here, but when something doesn't get resolved at the community board level, often a resolution from the committee goes to the respective agency. Now, this is a true statement, and it's an open statement. It just says what's the truth. And it shouldn't affect the fact that, the fact that the resolution, the original resolution was tabled should have no relevance to making that statement in this resolution. You're just making the statement. It's a true statement. It happened. You're not saying that you're not projecting the vote. You're just mentioning what happened. And I think it's entirely appropriate.
Well, let's see what Mohit has to say because it's his resolution.
Apologize for the background noise there. I didn't hear all that conversation. Apologies. I think
if you didn't hear me, I'm sorry, Mohit. If you didn't hear me, let me just very briefly tell you what I said. I said in the beginning, if you would accept this, at the beginning of your resolution, the whereas, I would start it with whereas.
Sorry.
Whereas the congestion pricing task force committee voted against congestion pricing program at its committee meeting last month, and the full resolution was tabled at the resolution was tabled at the full board. We, however, suggest the following to go into effect should congestion pricing program become active. I'm just telling of an activity of a thing that actually took place, and I think it's relevant to this resolution just to mention that it took place. And we have no resolution from the full board. So it's not a recommendation, it's just telling of the event that it was voted down at the committee level. However, should it go into effect, we recommend the following, which is your resolution, which I think is an excellent one.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. That's very helpful. And also very helpful is that Zach figured out how to get the draft resolution into the chat. So hopefully folks can see that.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter if it goes into the chat for me. I mean, if you want to just add it and put it on the screen, that's fine.
So here's what I would say. So I think the resolution should stand as it is. And if the full board makes a broader resolution on congestion pricing, then this could be part of that, or we can amend this at this time. But I think it's most appropriate to keep this the way this is, primarily for the reasons that that Craig raised, and in particular, I think this is written in an agnostic manner. So if congestion pricing doesn't move forward, then the resolution is moot, and so be it.
Okay, thank you.
I think Ed next, and then again, I just have a thing about people being able to speak on something that can be controversial or generates a lot. Billy hasn't spoken, so Ed, if you could be quick, and then Billy quick, and then if we're going to go back to anyone. I know, Judy, you're raising your hand frantically too. I see.
All right, so I'm going to make a couple of hopefully salient points. One thing I would like to address to disabuse folks of I think a canard that goes around the city with respect to driving. Anybody who thinks that driving is some sort of joy, I heard it mentioned that if we want to go flitting around in our cars, let me tell you, for those who grew up in the suburbs like I did in Washington, D.C. for many years, you have to take a car, and there is no joy. Okay, I don't know who is joyfully driving in New York City. I do not take that car out in joy. Okay, I walk. I will rather walk 80 blocks, which I do, rather than take the subway, which will break down, or the cab that'll get caught in traffic, and God forbid, drive. Anybody who thinks that driving is some sort of joy in this city and that we flit around like, what's his name in Arthur, that's just, let me disabuse you of that. And for those of you who don't watch New York One on a regular basis, I heard from a member of New York City out in the desert, transportation desert in the outer boroughs, who was quite incensed at the idea that there was some sort of rich person out there using $100 bills to light, their cigarettes or something, and they drive around as some sort of luxurious thing. They drive because they have no other choice, and it's a burden on them. So let's just disabuse people of the idea that driving in New York City is some sort of joy and everybody loves it and it's their first choice. It is not. In my experience, it is not. Second, in terms of this resolution, I would like to maybe offer up, I don't know if it's a friendly amendment. I understand, Mohit, you don't want anything on it, but I think you should have something to what Andrew Fine said and the unintended consequences of what's going to happen with placards, because we've seen the placard abuse that runs rampant in this city already with the cops, that you should have some sort of penalty enforcement for people who are faking, who get caught faking, gaming the system and using the paper license plates, the plastic sheets over your license plate so you don't get popped by the readers, all that sorts of thing. I think that maybe should be part of it. And finally, I would like to point out something that happened back in 2006, just so you know, with respect to unintended consequences and with respect to regressivity. Although, Michael, I applaud you, very nicely done. Expect nothing less from a UC economist as to the definition of regressivity. But if you want to think about what really happens to people when you raise fees, go back to 2006 in this city under Mike Bloomberg, when they imposed fees on people for recreation centers. I think it's probably been forgotten because it's 15 years ago. I'm looking at an article now, and you'll forgive me because I'm not looking at you as I look at the New York Times, dated December 7th, 2010 by Javier Hernandez. To trim deficit, mayor seeks increased fees for recreation. I won't bore you with the whole thing, but the point is, with respect to that, I'll read just one quick passage. The city estimates that membership would decline at rec centers by about 5% if higher fees were instituted. The next sentence reads, when the city made fees mandatory at all centers in 2006, standard adult membership dropped nearly 40%. That's all. I just want to put that out there, that, it's regressive, folks. Yeah, a lot of people, look, we have a higher income, but regressive, it has an impact. $20 makes a difference. I know everything nowadays costs $20, but it does make a difference. So that's all I wanted to say, but I did want to offer up the penalty portion for this resolution. That was something new I wanted to add. Whether you want to put it in there or not, that's fine, but I just wanted to throw it out there. Thank you, Alita. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. Mohit, do you want to include that in the resolution?
He stepped away. He has his coffee cup.
And then let's, Judy Schneider had a point of information.
Yeah, the resolution doesn't say anything about the elderly, talks about the handicap. Didn't we discuss also for the elderly?
No, this was,
Granted, I'm in that category and probably the only one on this call.
I raised the question of whether we want to cover people who are not fitting within a technical definition of disabled, which might include some elderly people, or if it's enough to just say very broadly defined. I don't know, and Mohit's not here. So
Well, maybe when he comes back, we could
Yeah.
ask. Because I know right now, with Barry, for instance, we're elderly and we have a very distinct problem.
Right, so he has his coffee cup up, so he'll be back. Let's
So
put that.
maybe you can add that to the other question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I was going to say, and I think we need to actually call the question after Billy speaks, because if Mohit's not back by that, there's always a chance for friendly amendments if need be.
I just want
board meeting.
I just want to say, Billy's is said to skip him because his microphone and headphones are having issues. So.
Okay, so then I don't see.
So I don't see anyone else, and the question has been
And
called,
I don't see Mohit here at all anymore on our.
No, he's on. Actually, now his coffee cup.
He's unmuted. He's
I don't
here.
even-
Yeah, sorry about that. I just had to step away again.
That's okay. I didn't even see you listed anymore. Oh, there you are. Okay. It moves around. What can I say? Okay, so there were two potential friendly amendments. Do you know what they are?
I heard Ed's on placards.
Okay, so we'll go in reverse order. Do you want to include that?
On that one, I think it's a different issue. I think we could have a whole separate meeting on placard abuse. I think that's a valid concern, but I just don't think it's central to this resolution.
And in fact, Transportation Committee next week is talking about placard abuse. Next Wednesday, folks.
There we go.
Right, but this is specific, I
Right.
think, to the placards for the exemption or discount for people with disabilities.
Yes, I understood. And I think one of the things we may talk about in the next item under next discussion points could be things related to parking. I think that's clearly one of the top issues that we're going to have to face, but we can get back to that.
Okay, Billy seems to have fixed his problem, so let's go back to Billy.
Alita, you said there was a second.
There
friendly
was.
amendment?
Was that Barbara's? Okay, she's nodding her head. Could we unmute Barbara so she could say it again, please?
I think I second, third, and fourth it. So
No,
yes.
yeah, no, she seconded the calling the question.
Right.
Oh, so what am I
There
doing?
was something, there was another.
It was
friendly
Judy.
amendment.
It was Judy.
Oh, it was Judy about the elderly?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
about. Yeah.
Is that, and you wanted to post that as a friendly amendment, Mohit? How do you feel about including elderly?
I missed that entire conversation. I
So
apologize.
she was basically saying, in terms of people who have special circumstances or maybe are considered elderly, that they would be in a similar position where they would need potential, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Similar treatment?
Yeah,
Similar-
or accommodations, similar
Yeah.
to how we're talking about people with disabilities.
Okay. I think actually same answer I give to Ed, which is that let's try to keep this tightly on disabilities. I think that's kind of a similar yet different issue. And I think there's a lot of overlap, and to the extent that a comprehensive definition for temporary or permanent disabilities includes people with mobility issues or whatever, then that probably includes many of the same individuals. But I would like to keep this tightly construed to disabilities, and then we could have a separate conversation on other categories of exemptions and discounts or et cetera.
Well, would you just as a rephrasing, would you then instead of a separate entry for seniors or elderly people, say including people with mobility issues? Is that what you just said, or did you say you wanted to discuss that in a separate meeting?
So, Frank, and so this is what I think the two words comprehensively defined, and number two is those two words are trying to do a lot, and I think that's where I would imagine that a comprehensive definition of people who are temporarily or permanently disabled, who should get a discount or exemption, should include people who have certain mobility issues and
Right,
find it
and right,
difficult to understand.
and if you don't mind, I'll just add that, I mean, as we've heard many people state, disability has many different definitions. Some people, their disabilities may not be apparent to other people. So I think, I would think that we want to just be careful with how we have this and keep it as broadly defined as possible. So it is viewed as inclusive. And I think my take is from what you wrote that if the resolution language accomplishes that.
Yep, no,
Okay,
I agree with
then-
that. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. Okay, Billy, if we could go to you quickly and then calling the question.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I was actually going to call the question, but I guess it was called.
Yeah, Lori called it. So that's it. Okay.
Yes,
So
so if
then
we
Lori-
could, yeah, if we could just lower the hands, please, and then I want to just make sure I have everyone who's currently here listed. So it is, I'm just going to do it, read the names as they appear now on the list. It's myself, Mohit, Alita, Barbara, Billy, Ed, Elizabeth Rose, Judy, Lori, Marco. Let me just scroll down a little. Michelle, Paul, and Russell. Did I miss anyone who's on the board?
No, that's everyone on the board.
Okay, great. So anyone, this is in support of Mohit's resolution. Anyone who is opposed or wishes to abstain or not vote for cause, please raise your hands.
Two more seconds. Well, it looks unanimous, which is really good for us. So I have to say.
That is very good. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for all your effort in getting to this point.
And I also I do want to thank everyone too. And I also want to say that with Russell's permission, if this resolution gets passed at the full board meeting, it should be sent to CB11, CB5, and at least known to other community boards through borough board if they're interested in having it, that it should go to them too.
Absolutely.
I mean, I will send it to everybody and I will definitely mention it at Borough Board.
Great. Mission accomplished. Thank you, everyone, for being so patient and so clear and so so considerate of trying to get this done in a non-polarized and comprehensive way. Anyone, any motion to adjourn? Oh, we're going to talk about
let's
topics,
make
right?
sure we go to the next item quickly and hopefully we
I know I jumped the gun. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I
the
hate
next,
that expression now.
yeah. So the next item, as I was alluding to on a number of occasions, is identification of future focused topic areas to be discussed at upcoming task force meetings. So just based on what I've heard tonight and based off of what I've heard in the past, I've tried to categorize different potential topic areas, and I'm happy to hear if there are others that should be added, but the ones that I've heard so far are boundary zone issues, which we've talked about in the past, maybe not so much tonight, but the issues unique to those who live within close proximity or alongside the tolls, where the tolls will be, just above 60th Street. Policies related to parking that relate to congestion pricing. So that could include some of what we've discussed regarding placards and concerns regarding garages and on-street parking permits, things of that nature. Policies related to for-hire vehicles and taxis, although we touched upon some of that tonight. Policies related to post-implementation monitoring and of impacts and revenues and concerns regarding financial fiduciary responsibility of the MTA, I heard people want to discuss the discussion on or discuss pricing, what the tolls would actually be, and those recommendations. So those are the categories that I have so far. I guess the question that I have for those who are here is, are there any other topics, broad-based topics that can incorporate a number of the issues that we've been discussing that I left out? And which ones should we prioritize, knowing that we spent almost 3 hours talking about this issue tonight, and we probably can only do 1 or maximum of 2 per meeting, depending on, and I don't know that we fully have a next meeting date scheduled yet, but we're hoping to meet in November.
I have
do you have anything to add to that, or?
I do, but I see if Michelle and Barbara and Russell have their hands raised, and so do Billy. I just will throw out the idea of elderly people or other people that might be treated similarly to disabled people, and also the idea of ancillary unintended consequences, such as the issue raised by Richie Torres in the Bronx, which could be increased asthma, increased lung issues because of an anticipated increase in pollution emanating from diesel trucks stuck on the Cross Bronx Expressway, which is already a parking lot. So that's what I would add, but I jumped ahead of all these other hands from the board. So
you're allowed to.
Michelle, Barbara, Russell, Billy, and Marco.
Thank you. Yeah, I think your topics are good, Craig, but they're quite broad. A lot of things come under some of those headings. So I would just like to specifically offer the financial impact on theaters and restaurants and museums. You could make cultural institutions in the zone. I think they're going to take a tremendous hit, and I would be surprised if they're not actively involved. But I think you really should separate that out. That's a big percentage of the financing that's going on in Midtown. And the city actually drives the city.
There are also different issues because cultural organizations like museums are mostly open in the daytime when fees will be higher. Restaurants, both daytime and nighttime. Broadway, mostly nighttime, some daytime with 2 or 3 matinees. I don't know if that matters at all.
Well, there's nothing in the, as far as I know, in the pricing that's offering different pricing at different times of the day. And certainly there are 2 matinees during the week. The museums are open a couple of nights a week. You want to pull the museums out of there, you can.
No, I don't want to pull them out, but I would also include museums north of the zone. But I don't think we need to focus on the specifics right now. I think your point is well taken, at least for me, is that the economic factors that drive New York City's economy are maybe in a different category.
Exactly, and they shouldn't be lumped together with how this will affect garage prices, for example. I mean, Broadway and the restaurants, this is, you know, these drive the city. This is why tourists come. So I think you really have to discuss that and maybe get some people who are involved. I wonder how, what is it, Community Board 5 that encompasses the theater district? I wonder if they've raised this.
They haven't yet. I spoke to them.
Okay, well, it'd be good to talk to them. And the Restaurant Association, Andrew Riggy, how he feels about this.
Well, okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Michelle. And we could have guest speakers, I suppose, for other ones. Barbara.
You mentioned revenue, but I think that the idea that was expressed that the MTA the money should go directly to MTA. One of the things I was going to say before, we keep talking about elevators. I'm not against elevators, but what I would like also to stress is the bus routes. Elevators, we know elevators are coming in 30 years. If you take that elevator on 86th Street, I purposely did, I was going uptown. It was the most disgusting 20 seconds I ever had. They're dangerous, they're smelly, the place for the homeless to do their business and so on. the buses with select bus, if we get not increase the stops of the select bus, but get more select bus routes, we have more local, and we go to the deserts that's there, it's much easier to open up a bus route than it is to build an elevator. And nobody wants the elevator near them. I used to go to the 2nd Avenue subway meetings, and my God, the one on 86th Street, they had a lawyer, they didn't want to buy their street. It is not an easy thing to have. It's much easier to get a bus route, and I would like to sort of stress the fact that along with elevators, but that I always feel the buses get a short shift and we don't talk about it. And the senior people and the disabled people, you're safe in a wheelchair on a bus. In terms of security, you're much safer on a bus than you are on a subway. And I think that should be stressed, but certainly we could talk about the monies that go how the MTA should use the money and make sure they get it.
Thank you. Russell?
Yeah, thank you. So I would say my suggestions are exemptions and what they should be. And then the other issue I would say is enforcement, which for me includes both just sort of generally how, congestion pricing is going to be sort of tracked day to day in terms of how the fare toll system works. Is it going to be cameras? Is it going to be, where are they going to be? That sort of thing. But also the issue that Ed raised about, kind of placard abuse and other kinds of issues that you might have, and in the context of congestion pricing. So maybe those are two separate issues, but I would sort of put them broadly under the heading of enforcement.
Okay, thank you. Billy?
I was going to suggest a couple things. One is, continued work on what we can do to get commitments from the MTA to devote congestion pricing revenues to accessibility improvements, especially but not limited to elevators. If we look at our neighborhood alone, right, we've got so many, including 86th Street, which only has, I think, elevator on the uptown side, plus I believe it's 96th Street and 77th and few others even on the Lex line that don't have elevators. So that would be number one. Number two is, it was sort of interesting reading the MTA's environmental assessment, because they list all these alternatives to congestion pricing and the effects they would have and whether or not they meet the goals. And one of the goals, right, is reducing vehicles miles traveled in the CBD by 5%. Another goal is reducing the number of vehicles in the central business district by 10%. And very few alternatives met that. But one alternative that did meet those goals was reducing government parking placards. So I know, Craig, you mentioned that before as a topic, but I would put that very high on our list because it's relevant to what we're about, right? Congestion pricing or congestion. And it seems to be, at least from that preliminary study, and to my surprise, it would actually achieve some of the goals that congestion pricing has. So I think we should make that very high on our list because we've already studied that a little bit as a board, and I think had some consensus around it. And it's something that, as far as I understand, the city could basically do more or less on its own. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's an area where we could potentially have a huge impact, shining a light on it and reducing congestion further that way.
Thank you. Marco and then Ed.
Thank you, Alida. Thank you, Craig. One thing I'd like to address. The first, I don't know when we lost what we usually do. Every time that any public member speaks, he has to express his name and he has to give the address. We have been operated for many, many years and suddenly disappear. This is extremely important. This is extremely important because we need to know who are our community members and who are coming from the other communities, which is they have the right to express their opinion, but we need to know. This is one point. The other point that I would like to raise is actually two. The first one is affordable housing. Affordable housing, especially subsidized housing, rent control, rent stabilization. The issue is very simple over there. and very complicated. Every year there is a fight that they're gonna raise. The landlord say 2%, 6% is too low. The tenant said is already too expensive. And now with the congestion pricing, what is gonna impact tremendously? It will be affordable housing. Why? Because the landlord will say, look, now I have to pay more money for the deliveries, more money for transportation, more money for the services, more money for that one. And basically now it's gonna impact tremendously the affordable housing, especially in the district that is right now the congestion pricing. And I think that is going to impact and create a spatial segregation by income in those areas. And now the second point that I have been thinking for a while, this is a point of view of urban planning. And I think it's very close what Elizabeth Rose raised, is if we find it, who are coming to the district, we can figure it out exactly who create the congestion, and we can create the same activities in other parts of the city, and we have an opportunity to avoid rich neighborhood and poor neighborhood. Give an opportunity to other neighborhood to grow too. So rather than everybody run to the center, there are some activities that must belong to a specific, for that specific place, especially the judicial center. It has to be probably stay over there. But in other activities can be relocated. And if they relocate these activities, you don't need congestion pricing. You are losing your time in that direction. The only thing that you're doing is to raise money. And we can figure it out different kind of alternative to resolve the income. There are different choices, different ideas that we can go in that direction. But when I hear that coming with examples that London, all the cities, you see even the picture of these cities. This is a very low, a low density communities, density cities, very low densities. You see 4 or 5 stories is the highest. 7 stories probably is like in Paris State in those cities. Yes, of course, London has some towers, but there are few. If you compare in our district, it's the highest density in the entire country. So if we analyze this point of view from the point of view of urban planning, what we have to do is to diversify our activities to different parts of the community, and that's going directly with what it is the blood center too. So everybody wanna put the money, wanna build what the money is so they can have more profits. That's the point. And that is becoming that the city lacks of planning. The planning has to establish where this blood center can be built without no problems. And they have to create incentives to the developer so they can profit too. Because if we don't do this kind of actions, then we have the same problems, congestion pricing. And the congestion pricing is not a solution, believe me. People will start coming back and forth, especially for high income, or especially like Michelle mentioned, the theater district. People, they will go for this kind of activities. But for other activities, for those people that would limit the income lives over there, this is going to create a serious problem. And I would like to discuss affordable housing and the impact of congestion pricing. Thank you.
Well, luckily Ed is here, who's one of the chairs of the housing committee, so that's good. Ed?
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. Yeah, how that affects. But I was just going to suggest, and I don't know, Craig and I talked about this at the street fair on Sunday. And again, this unintended consequences. And I'm sorry I didn't do the research. I was more focused on what we had going for tonight. But this bill that Dinowitz, Assemblymember Dinowitz introduced regarding I guess it is red light cameras or some such thing. What the point I'm raising is there seems to be some chatter or maybe bills being introduced for press attention, but imposing, I forgot what it was. I think Dinowitz's bill, Craig, correct me, you did some research on it, but Dinowitz's bill would punish folks coming from states who don't enforce our red light camera infractions. I don't know. It seems, and what I'm trying to get at is there seems to be some brewing animosity between ourselves, and Chair Santiago raised this when he was talking about London and bordering states when he was talking about implementation of congestion pricing in London. We are next door to New Jersey and respect with the river and the Hudson. I'm concerned about this back and forth fighting between the states because New Jersey has rejected congestion pricing. From what I've read, 8 years ago, they rejected it. So I don't know, and maybe this is something just for the community board to monitor. I don't know, maybe it's not a topic of discussion, but I think we should keep an eye on it as to what kind of animosity is growing between New York and New Jersey with respect to those who have to drive back and forth in some way across the river in terms of punishing each other for this toll, because I'm not sure if Governor Hochul and Governor Murphy are on the same page with respect to the implementation of this fee, tax, whatever you want to call it, on people coming in. I know there's a lot of squawking from New Jersey. They're already getting popped coming through on Easy Pass on the toll for the crossings, and then they're going to get congestion pricing on top of that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe find some way to keep an eye on that and see what's going on there, because I don't think it's good for any of us if the elected officials are going to go to war in terms of imposing fees on each other because of this. So I'm sorry I couldn't be a little more specific, but just a thought, something to throw into the mix for down the road as we do this, because I'm sure that that's not going to go away.
It's not just New Jersey. Rockland County is busy passing its own legislation to exempt itself from congestion pricing too, because they don't have mass transit.
There you go. That's exact. There you go. And that has an impact. And then, you're going to run more Metro North because of that. Again, and the MTA is involved in that, right? They run that. They're part of that. Leviathan. Again, I think there's a lot of this that no one has thought of because it looks good. It's a lot of cash, and frankly, a lot of this was going on during the pandemic. When no one was meeting in this horrid, and I'll go on the record, this horrid invention of Zoom. It was helpful when we all had to be quarantined in our house, but I think this is just a horrible invention for democracy and discourse among individuals and creating more community. I think it silos us and does not foster good, healthy discourse and discussion. And I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. Barbara? You're still muted.
I know. You see, my eyes are bad. I don't see it very well. Anyway, we should end it. I would just say, as an ex-New Jerseyite, people, when the bridges or tunnels were raised in price, there was all sorts of uproar. Of course, New Jersey doesn't want it. They want to have the freedom. They don't care about New York at all. You know what happened? Not with everybody, but many people started taking New Jersey Transit, the bus, the trains and so on to come in. The bus stops right by the theater district. So we already have, you're driving a car or taking it. Parking is ridiculous. The traffic is ridiculous. Gas is ridiculous. The tolls are ridiculous. Restaurants are very high. Theater is very high. I just bought 4 tickets for an hour of the Rockettes for my grandkids and everything. $800. I'm doing it. If you could afford it, you could do it. This is not the only time that something has happened to add the money. I know with New Jersey, if those want to come in by train, by car, they'll come in by car. There are plenty other ways of coming in. And once they do, I have one friend that said, why did I ever drive in?
Thank you.
That this is the only time that there's been a raise of prices and that this is the only thing that's costing money.
Thank you, Barbara. Lori? You're muted or something? Yeah, you're still muted. Give Zach a second. There you go.
I was going to move to adjourn.
Okay, no one else has their hands raised. Is any second? Lots
I
of
see plenty of
seconds.
seconds.
So then let's just say thank you everyone for coming and staying and participating. And Craig and I say it's adjourned. Yes, Craig?
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Have a
Bye.
good night.
Night.